Welcome to Crime Stories for Sleep. Before we begin tonight's journey, I'd love to know, where are you listening from, and what time is it right now? The town of Millbrook sits nestled in a valley where three gentle hills converge, their slopes covered in oak and maple trees that turn brilliant shades of amber and crimson each autumn. Founded in 1847 by settlers following the railroad westward, the town grew slowly and deliberately around the depot that still stands today, its red brick facade weathered but sturdy after nearly 2 centuries of service. Main Street stretches for exactly 12 blocks, lined with buildings that tell the story of different eras. The Victorian courthouse with its clock tower, the Art Deco facade of what was once the town's only movie theater, and the modest storefronts that have housed everything from haberdasheries to internet cafes. The Millbrook Police Department occupies a 2-story building constructed in 1962, when the town council decided the old sheriff's office in the courthouse basement had become inadequate for a community that had grown to just over 4,000 residents. The building's exterior is unremarkable red brick, chosen to match the depot and courthouse, with large windows that let in the morning light and cast long rectangles across the hardwood floors. Inside, the walls are painted a soft cream color that has faded slightly over the decades, and the air carries the faint scent of old paper and the cleaning solution the custodian uses every Tuesday evening. Chief Margaret Holloway has overseen the department for the past 18 years, having taken the position after serving as a detective in the county seat for a decade before that. She chose Millbrook for its quiet nature, its predictable rhythms, and what she hoped would be a peaceful conclusion to her career in law enforcement. The department employs 7 full-time officers, 2 part-time dispatchers, and 1 civilian clerk who manages the filing systems and maintains the extensive records that stretch back to the department's founding. The records room occupies most of the building's basement, accessible through a narrow staircase behind the main desk. Metal shelving units line the walls and create aisles throughout the space, each shelf filled with manila folders, bound reports, and boxes containing evidence from cases both solved and unsolved. The oldest files date to 1962, though some earlier records were transferred from the sheriff's office and can be traced back to the 1920s. The room stays cool year-round, maintained at a constant temperature and humidity to preserve the documents, and the only sounds are the gentle hum of the dehumidifier and the occasional creak of the building settling. Above. Each file tells a story of daily life in Millbrook, from traffic accidents on the winding roads that lead into town to noise complaints between neighbors whose property lines have been disputed for generations. The majority of reports document minor incidents, domestic disturbances that resolve themselves before officers arrive, teenagers caught drinking behind the old grain elevator, vandalism that usually amounts to spray paint on the overpass supports where the highway crosses Miller's Creek. These files form the foundation of the town's recorded history, a paper trail of human nature playing out in small-town circumstances. Officer Daniel Matthews joined the force 12 years ago, fresh from the police academy and eager to make a difference in a community where he had spent his childhood summers visiting his grandmother. He quickly learned that police work in Millbrook operated at a different pace than what he had imagined during his training. Days could pass without a single call requiring immediate response, and officers often found themselves serving more as community liaisons than law enforcers, helping elderly residents with minor problems, checking on businesses during off hours, and maintaining a visible presence that reassured citizens more through familiarity than authority. The daily routine begins each morning at 6 when the overnight officer completes the shift report, documenting any calls received during the quiet hours between midnight and dawn. These reports typically record routine patrols through the residential neighborhoods, checks of the business district to ensure doors remain locked and windows intact, and the occasional response to automatic alarms that invariably prove false, triggered by small animals, weather, or electrical fluctuations in the aging buildings downtown. Officer Sarah Chun handles most of the day shift responsibilities, arriving each morning at 7 to review the overnight reports and plan her patrol route based on any concerns noted by her colleague. She has developed relationships with many of the shop owners and restaurant managers along Main Street, stopping by regularly to chat briefly and gather information about any unusual activity they might have observed. These conversations rarely yield actionable intelligence, but they create a network of informal surveillance that has proven valuable on the few occasions when actual crimes occur. The afternoon shift belongs to Officer James Rodriguez, who covers the hours from 3 until 11 when families are returning from work and school, when teenagers gather in the small park behind the library, and when the evening crowd begins to populate Murphy's Tavern and the diner that stays open until 9. His patrol takes him through the residential streets where children play in yards surrounded by chain-link fences and gardens filled with tomatoes and sunflowers, past the elementary school where crossing guards still escort students across the intersection that serves as the town's only traffic bottleneck. Evening brings a different quality of light to Millbrook, softer and more golden as it filters through the old oak trees that line many of the residential streets. The shadows grow longer and more complex, creating patterns on the sidewalks and lawns that shift gradually as the sun moves toward the horizon. During these hours, Officer Rodriguez often receives calls that reflect the social dynamics of small-town life. Noise complaints from neighbors who have tolerated loud music or barking dogs until their patience finally expires. Reports of suspicious persons who usually turn out to be visitors unfamiliar to residents, accustomed to recognizing everyone who belongs in their neighborhood. The night shift presents its own particular atmosphere. When Officer Patricia Walsh begins her patrol at 11 and continues until the morning officer arrives at 6. These are the hours when Millbrook reveals its most intimate character, when most residents have settled into their homes and only the hardiest night owls remain active. Street lights create pools of yellow illumination connected by stretches of darkness, and the sounds of daytime activity give way to the subtler noises of a town at rest. The distant rumble of freight trains passing through without stopping, the rustle of small animals moving through alleys and yards, the occasional car traveling the state highway that bypasses the town center. Officer Walsh has developed an appreciation for these quiet hours, when her patrol car moves through empty streets and she can observe Millbrook without the distractions of traffic or pedestrians. She knows which houses typically show lights late into the evening, which residents suffer from insomnia and might be glimpsed moving past their windows at unusual hours, and which businesses maintain security lights that cast particular patterns of shadows across the sidewalks and parking areas. The police station itself takes on a different character during the night hours, when only one officer and the night dispatcher occupy the building. The fluorescent lights in the main office dim automatically after 10, leaving only the essential illumination needed for safety and the soft glow from the computer screens and radio equipment. The dispatcher, usually either Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell or Mr. Thomas Kimura, both part-time employees who cover the overnight hours on alternating weeks, monitors the radio frequencies and maintains contact with Officer Walsh during her patrol. Mrs. Hartwell brings knitting projects to pass the quiet hours between calls, her needles clicking softly in the background when Officer Walsh radios in her location, checks and status reports. She has worked the night dispatch for 7 years and has developed an intuitive sense for the rhythm of the town after dark, recognizing the difference between normal quiet and the kind of silence that might indicate something unusual occurring beyond the range of immediate observation. Mr. Kimura, a retired postal worker who took the dispatch position to supplement his pension, brings crossword puzzles and Sudoku books to occupy his attention during the long stretches when the radio remains silent. He has a methodical approach to documentation, carefully recording every radio transmission and noting precise times for all communications. His reports tend to be more detailed than Mrs. Hartwell's, including observations about weather conditions, unusual sounds heard through the open windows, and the general sense of activity or stillness that characterizes each particular night. The filing system that maintains all these reports follows a structure established by Chief Holloway shortly after she took command of the department. Reports are categorized first by date, then by type of incident, with cross-references maintained for cases that might relate to ongoing concerns or patterns of activity that develop over time. The civilian clerk, Ms. Janet Morrison, updates the filing system daily, ensuring that new reports are properly categorized and that older files remain accessible for research or reference. Ms. Morrison has worked for the police department for 15 years and has developed an encyclopedic knowledge of the filing system and the types of incidents that occur regularly in Millbrook. She can locate specific reports from years past with remarkable efficiency and often notices connections between seemingly unrelated incidents that might escape the attention of officers focused on immediate concerns. Her desk occupies a corner of the main office where she can observe the daily activities of the department while maintaining her own quiet workspace surrounded by carefully organized stacks of documents awaiting processing. The evidence room, located adjacent to the records archive in the basement, contains items collected from various investigations over the years. Most consist of routine materials, photographs of minor traffic accidents, personal items recovered from vehicles involved in driving under the influence arrests, and miscellaneous objects found during searches related to petty theft or vandalism cases. The room maintains a catalog system that corresponds to the filing system upstairs, allowing officers and administrators to locate specific items when needed for court proceedings or case reviews. Some evidence has remained in storage for years, related to cases that were resolved, but where items could not be returned to their owners or were retained as insurance against appeals or related legal proceedings. These objects accumulate gradually, creating a physical archive that parallels the paper records upstairs. Bicycles recovered from theft reports where the owners never came forward to claim them. Jewelry found during investigations where ownership could not be established. Electronic devices seized during searches but never claimed by anyone with legitimate ownership rights. The oldest evidence dates to the early 1970s and includes items that seem almost quaint by current standards. Analog cameras, vinyl record albums, hand tools of types no longer commonly used. Clothing styles that mark specific decades with unmistakable precision. Ms. Morrison conducts periodic reviews of the evidence inventory, identifying items that have exceeded the mandatory retention periods and can be disposed of according to departmental procedures. But she approaches this task carefully, knowing that seemingly insignificant objects sometimes prove relevant to cases that remain officially open despite years of inactivity. Chief Holloway maintains regular office hours from 8 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon, though she often arrives earlier and stays later depending on the demands of particular situations or administrative requirements. Her office occupies the corner of the building's second floor, with windows that provide views of Main Street in one direction and the residential neighborhood in the other. She has arranged her desk to take advantage of both views, allowing her to observe the daily rhythms of the town while maintaining privacy for meetings and phone calls that require confidentiality. Walls of her office display the typical decorations found in small-town police departments, framed certificates from training programs and law enforcement associations, photographs from department picnics and community events, a map of Millbrook and the surrounding county marked with colored pins indicating different types of recurring concerns. A bookshelf contains reference materials related to police procedures, legal updates, and administrative guidelines, along with several volumes of local history that she consults when questions arise about property boundaries, historical incidents, or the background of long-term residents. Chief Holloway has developed relationships with her counterparts in surrounding communities, participating in monthly meetings where chiefs and sheriffs share information about regional concerns, and coordinate responses to situations that might affect multiple jurisdictions. These meetings typically address routine administrative matters, budget considerations, personnel issues, updates on training requirements, and discussions of new laws or regulations that affect police operations. Occasionally, however, these meetings reveal patterns of activity that suggest coordination or movement of criminal enterprises between communities, requiring more detailed communication and cooperation. Radio system that connects the Millbrook Police Department with other agencies operates on frequencies shared with the county sheriff's office and the state police, allowing officers to monitor activities in adjacent areas and to request assistance when situations exceed the capabilities of the small department. Officer Matthews, who has developed expertise in communications technology, maintains the radio equipment and ensures that all officers receive proper training in radio protocols and emergency procedures. During quiet periods, officers often monitor radio traffic from other jurisdictions, learning about situations developing in nearby communities and occasionally recognizing names or locations that might relate to previous incidents in Millbrook. This passive monitoring serves as an early warning system for problems that might eventually affect their own community, and it provides context for understanding regional trends in criminal activity or public safety concerns. The town's geographic location provides both advantages and challenges for police operations. Millbrook sits approximately 15 miles from the county seat, close enough for easy coordination with sheriff's deputies and county services, but far enough to maintain its distinct identity and self-reliant character. The state highway passes within 2 miles of the town center, providing convenient access to regional transportation networks while allowing Millbrook to avoid the problems associated with heavy through traffic. Two smaller roads connect Millbrook to neighboring communities, one following Miller's Creek toward the east and eventually joining a major north-south route, the other climbing through the hills to the west and connecting with a network of county roads that serve the rural areas and small farms that surround the town. These roads require regular patrol attention, particularly during winter months when weather conditions can create hazardous driving situations, and during harvest seasons when agricultural traffic increases significantly. The railroad tracks that originally brought settlers to Millbrook continue to serve freight traffic, with trains passing through several times each day, carrying grain from regional farms and manufactured goods between distant cities. The trains do not stop in Millbrook anymore, the passenger service having been discontinued in the 1960s, but the tracks in the adjacent railroad right-of-way require occasional police attention when trespassers or vandals cause problems that could affect train operations or public safety. Officer Chun has developed expertise in railroad-related issues, maintaining contact with the railroad police who have jurisdiction over the tracks themselves, but often require local assistance for problems that extend beyond the immediate right-of-way. She has learned to recognize the schedules of regular freight runs and can identify unusual train activity that might indicate problems requiring attention or investigation. The residential areas of Millbrook reflect the town's gradual growth over many decades, with older neighborhoods near the town center featuring houses built in the early and mid-20th century, and newer subdivisions on the outskirts containing more contemporary homes constructed as the community slowly expanded. The older neighborhoods maintain mature trees, established gardens, and the kind of settled atmosphere that comes from families living in the same houses for multiple generations. These established residential areas generate most of the calls that keep police officers busy during daytime hours. Neighbor disputes over property lines or noise levels, reports of suspicious activity that usually involve unfamiliar visitors or unusual activity patterns, and requests for assistance with problems that fall somewhere between genuine emergencies and simple inconveniences. Officer Chun has learned to navigate these situations with patience and diplomacy, understanding that her response often matters less for its immediate practical effect than for its demonstration that the police department remains accessible and responsive to citizen concerns. The newer residential areas tend to generate different types of calls, often related to the social dynamics of families adjusting to new surroundings and neighbors still getting acquainted with each other. These areas typically feature younger residents, families with children, and people who commute to work in larger communities, but chose Millbrook for its quiet character and affordable housing. The calls from these neighborhoods often involve minor traffic concerns, complaints about children's activities, and requests for increased patrols during vacation periods, when houses remain unoccupied for extended periods. Downtown Millbrook consists primarily of the 12 blocks of Main Street, with a few additional businesses located on the cross streets that intersect the main commercial corridor. The business district includes the usual array of establishments found in small towns. A hardware store that has operated continuously since the 1940s, 2 restaurants that cater to different clienteles and price ranges, a pharmacy that also serves as an unofficial community bulletin board, and several specialty shops that depend largely on residents rather than visitors for their customer base. Murphy's Tavern anchors one end of the business district, occupying a building that began as a hotel in the 1890s and gradually evolved into its current incarnation as the town's primary gathering place for social drinking and informal community meetings. The establishment operates with the kind of self-regulating atmosphere common in small towns, where most customers know each other and problems rarely escalate beyond minor disagreements that resolve themselves without requiring police intervention. The Diner, officially named Millbrook Family Restaurant, but known universally as The Diner, serves as another informal community center, particularly during breakfast and lunch hours when local residents, business owners, and visitors gather over coffee and meals. The establishment's central location and extended hours make it a natural gathering place for information exchange, and the staff often possess detailed knowledge about local activities, visiting strangers, and unusual occurrences that might interest police officers seeking to understand developing situations. Officer Rodriguez has cultivated relationships with employees at both establishments, stopping by regularly during his afternoon and evening shifts to maintain visibility and gather information about any concerns or observations that might prove relevant to police operations. These informal contacts provide early warning about developing problems and help maintain the kind of community policing approach that works effectively in small-town settings. The library, located in a Carnegie building constructed in 1911, serves as both an educational resource and a community gathering place, particularly for teenagers and elderly residents who use it as a quiet retreat during daytime hours. The building's architecture and central location make it a natural focal point for the downtown area, and the library staff often observe activities throughout the business district from their windows overlooking Main Street and the adjacent park. Ms. Patricia Eldridge, the head librarian, has worked at the Millbrook Library for over 20 years and maintains detailed knowledge about local families, their histories, and their current circumstances. She often serves as an informal information resource for police officers investigating situations that might benefit from background knowledge about individuals or families involved in various incidents. Her assistance operates within appropriate boundaries of confidentiality and privacy, but she understands the value of providing context that helps officers respond appropriately to situations involving community members. The park adjacent to the library consists of approximately 2 acres of open space, mature trees, and walking paths that connect the downtown area with the residential neighborhoods beyond. During daylight hours, the park serves families with young children, elderly residents who use the walking paths for exercise, and students who gather after school hours. Evening brings different users, teenagers seeking gathering places away from adult supervision, adults walking dogs or exercising after work, and occasional individuals seeking quiet solitude in an outdoor setting. Officer Rodriguez includes the park in his regular patrol route, making periodic stops to maintain visibility and ensure that activities remain within acceptable bounds. His presence serves more as reassurance than enforcement, since serious problems rarely develop in such an open and visible location. However, he has learned to recognize the difference between normal social activity and gatherings that might eventually require intervention, and he maintains relationships with the regular park users who can provide information about unusual activities or concerning behavior patterns. The municipal building, which houses city offices and the town council chambers, sits across the street from the police station, facilitating coordination between law enforcement and other city departments. Mayor Robert Chun, no relation to Officer Sarah Chun despite sharing a surname, has served in his position for 6 years and maintains a cooperative relationship with Chief Holloway on matters affecting public safety and law enforcement operations. The city clerk, Mrs. Dorothy Walsh, sister-in-law to Officer Patricia Walsh, maintains records related to business licenses, building permits, and other administrative matters that occasionally intersect with police operations. Her familiarity with property ownership, business operations, and civic activities provides valuable background information when officers investigate incidents involving commercial properties or public events. The fire department operates from a station located 3 blocks from the police station, close enough to facilitate coordination for emergency responses, but separate enough to maintain independent operations. The volunteer fire department consists of 18 active members who respond to structure fires, vehicle accidents, medical emergencies, and various situations requiring specialized equipment or expertise. Chief Robert Martinez, who works during the day as a mechanic at the local automotive repair shop, has served as volunteer fire chief for 8 years and has developed effective working relationships with the police department for situations requiring joint response. Emergency medical services for Millbrook are provided by the county ambulance service, with the nearest ambulance stationed approximately 10 miles away at the county hospital. Response times for medical emergencies typically range from 12 to 20 minutes, depending on weather conditions and the availability of crews, which means that police officers often serve as first responders for medical situations until professional medical personnel arrive on scene. Officer Walsh has completed advanced first aid training and carries emergency medical supplies in her patrol car, recognizing that her night shift duties might require providing initial medical assistance for heart attacks, injuries from accidents, or other situations where immediate response could prove critical. She has responded to several medical emergencies over her years with the department, and her reports of these incidents provide detailed documentation of the circumstances and her actions. Prior to the arrival of professional medical crews, the town's medical services consist of a small clinic staffed by Dr. Margaret Foster, who moved to Millbrook 15 years ago after completing her residency at the county hospital. The clinic operates during regular daytime hours and provides basic medical services for routine health maintenance and minor injuries or illnesses. Dr. Foster also serves as the informal coordinator for public health concerns that might affect the broader community, and she maintains communication with the police department regarding situations that might have public safety implications. During evening and weekend hours, residents requiring medical attention must travel to the county hospital or contact the ambulance service for transport to appropriate facilities. This arrangement works adequately for most situations, but it occasionally creates complications for police officers dealing with incidents involving injured or intoxicated individuals who require medical evaluation but might not meet the criteria for emergency ambulance transport. The school system serves approximately 600 students from kindergarten through 12th grade, with elementary classes housed in a building constructed in the 1950s and secondary students attending classes in a newer facility built in the 1980s when enrollment Growth necessitated expanded capacity. The schools generate occasional calls for police assistance, typically involving minor disciplinary matters, parking problems during events, or security concerns related to after-hours activities. Officer Matthews serves as the department's liaison with school administrators, attending safety meetings and coordinating responses to situations that might require police presence at school, events, or during regular school hours. His background in community policing and his familiarity with many local families make him particularly effective in handling situations involving students, and his regular presence at school events helps maintain positive relationships between law enforcement and the educational community. Agricultural areas surrounding Millbrook consist of family farms that have operated for multiple generations, producing corn, soybeans, and raising cattle on land that has remained in the same families since the original settlement period. These rural properties generate occasional calls for police assistance, theft of equipment or livestock, trespassing incidents, disputes over property boundaries or access rights, and accidents involving agricultural machinery on public roads. Officer Rodriguez has developed familiarity with the farming community through his patrol duties on the rural roads and his attendance at community events where farmers and town residents interact. He understands the seasonal rhythms of agricultural work and recognizes how farming activities affect traffic patterns, noise levels, and other concerns that might generate complaints or require police response. The relationship between the town residents and the farming community reflects the broader character of Millbrook as a place where different lifestyles and economic interests coexist with minimal conflict. Farmers depend on town businesses for supplies and services, while town residents benefit from the economic activity and the scenic rural landscape that farming maintains. Police officers serve as intermediaries when conflicts arise, helping to resolve disputes through communication and compromise rather than formal legal proceedings. Industrial activity in the Millbrook area consists primarily of a grain elevator complex near the railroad tracks, a small manufacturing facility that produces agricultural equipment, and several automotive repair and service businesses. These enterprises generate employment for local residents and contribute to the tax base that supports municipal services, but they also create potential sources of complaints related to noise, traffic, and environmental concerns. The grain elevator operates during harvest seasons with extended hours and increased truck traffic that can affect nearby residential areas. Officer Chun monitors these operations during the busy periods, ensuring that traffic flows smoothly and that noise levels remain within acceptable limits during evening and early morning hours when residential areas require quiet for sleep and rest. The manufacturing facility operates during regular daytime hours and typically generates few complaints or concerns requiring police attention. However, the facility's location near residential areas means that any unusual activity, such as emergency responses or security concerns, can quickly attract attention from nearby residents and generate calls requesting information or expressing concern about potential safety issues. Automotive repair businesses tend to generate calls related to customer disputes, noise from repair work, and occasionally theft of parts or tools from vehicles being serviced. Officer Rodriguez includes these businesses in his regular patrol route, maintaining relationships with the owners and employees who can provide information about suspicious activities or persons in the area. The economic life of Millbrook operates at a pace that reflects the town's small size and rural location, with business cycles tied closely to agricultural seasons, school schedules, and the weekly rhythms of family life. Most businesses close early in the evening and remain closed on Sundays, creating quiet periods when police patrols encounter few people on the streets and minimal activity in commercial areas. These quiet periods provide opportunities for officers to conduct thorough patrols of business districts, checking for signs of break-ins or vandalism, ensuring that security systems remain operational, and observing conditions that might require attention from building owners or city maintenance crews. The reports generated during these quiet patrol periods document the baseline conditions of the community, providing reference points for identifying changes or unusual circumstances that might develop over time. Chief Holloway reviews these patrol reports regularly, looking for patterns or trends that might indicate developing problems or opportunities for preventing future incidents through increased attention or community education efforts. Her administrative approach emphasizes proactive policing through careful observation and documentation rather than reactive responses to problems after they have already caused significant difficulties. The seasonal changes that affect Millbrook create predictable variations in the types of calls and concerns that occupy police attention throughout the year. Spring brings increased outdoor activity, construction and repair projects that might generate noise complaints, and agricultural work that affects traffic patterns on rural roads. Summer months typically see more social activity, outdoor gatherings that might create noise or parking problems, and vacation periods when unoccupied houses require additional security. Attention! Autumn harvest activities create their own patterns of concern, with increased truck traffic, extended working hours at agricultural facilities, and seasonal workers who might be unfamiliar with local customs and expectations. Winter brings weather-related challenges, icy roads that increase accident risks, heating problems that might create fire hazards or emergency situations, and the social stresses associated with holiday seasons and extended periods when outdoor activities become more difficult. Officer Walsh has developed particular expertise in recognizing how seasonal changes affect crime patterns and community concerns. Her night shift duties provide opportunities to observe these changes as they develop, and her reports often include detailed observations about how weather conditions, seasonal activities, and community events influence the types of calls and concerns that require police attention. The documentation maintained by the Millbrook Police Department creates a comprehensive record of community life that extends far beyond simple crime statistics or incident reports. The files contain detailed observations about social patterns, economic changes, and environmental conditions that affect the daily life of residents and the operation of businesses and institutions throughout the area. This comprehensive approach to documentation reflects Chief Holloway's understanding that effective police work in a small community requires deep knowledge of local conditions and relationships. Officers are encouraged to include contextual information in their reports, noting details that might seem insignificant at the time but could prove relevant to future investigations or community planning efforts. The accumulation of these detailed records over the years has created an archive that serves multiple purposes beyond immediate law enforcement needs. Researchers studying small-town social patterns, insurance investigators seeking background information about claims, and legal professionals working on cases involving property disputes or family matters have all found valuable information in the department's files, access to which is provided according to appropriate legal guidelines and privacy protections. Ms. Morrison, who manages the filing system, has developed procedures that balance accessibility with confidentiality requirements, ensuring that legitimate research needs can be met while protecting sensitive information about individuals and families. Her work creates an organized resource that serves the community's need for historical information while maintaining the integrity of law enforcement records and protecting individual privacy rights. Building that houses the police department has undergone several renovations and updates since its construction in 1962, but it retains the solid, practical character that reflects the community's approach to public services. The most recent renovation, completed 5 years ago, updated the communications equipment, improved the filing systems, and enhance the security measures that protect both personnel and records from unauthorized access. Chief Holloway has plans for additional improvements that would expand the evidence storage capacity, modernize the report writing systems to take advantage of current computer technology, and create more efficient workspace arrangements that would improve coordination between officers and administrative personnel. These improvements await budget approvals and reflect her long-term vision for maintaining effective police services as the community continues its gradual growth and development. Relationship between the police department and other municipal services operates through formal and informal coordination that recognizes the interconnected nature of community services in a small town. Street maintenance crews report suspicious activities observed during their work. Utility workers provide information about properties where service disconnections might indicate vacant buildings requiring security attention. And social service personnel coordinate with police on situations involving domestic violence, elder care, or juvenile issues. This collaborative approach extends to regional relationships with county and state agencies that provide specialized services beyond the capabilities of the small department. Detective services for major crimes, forensic analysis of physical evidence, and specialized training programs are available through the county sheriff's office and state police, ensuring that serious situations receive appropriate professional attention while allowing the local department to maintain its focus on community policing and routine public safety services. The community's relationship with law enforcement reflects the small town values of personal responsibility, mutual respect, and informal problem solving that characterize many aspects of life in Millbrook. Residents typically contact police when they have exhausted other options for resolving problems, and they expect officers to serve as mediators and advisors rather than simply enforcers of legal requirements. This expectation places particular demands on officers, who must possess strong communication skills, detailed knowledge of local conditions and relationships, and the judgment needed to determine when formal legal action is appropriate versus when informal intervention might better serve community interests. The department's approach to training and personnel development emphasizes these skills alongside traditional law enforcement techniques. The evening hours in Millbrook bring a particular quality of quiet that reflects the town's agricultural surroundings and its distance from major urban centers. As daylight fades, the sounds of daytime activity give way to the subtler noises of a community settling into evening routines. Doors closing as families gather for dinner, televisions broadcasting evening programs, dogs barking at passing cars or unfamiliar sounds, and the occasional conversation between neighbors working in their gardens or walking along the sidewalks that connect the residential areas with the downtown business district. Officer Rodriguez has learned to appreciate these evening hours as opportunities to observe the community in its most relaxed and authentic state, when the formal activities of business and education give way to the personal interactions that define social relationships and community character. His patrol during these hours serves more to maintain visible presence than to respond to specific problems, and his reports often include observations about social patterns, seasonal changes, and community events that provide context for understanding the broader environment in which police work takes place. The transition from evening to night brings its own changes in atmosphere and activity, as most residents retire to their homes and the responsibilities of night shift officers become more focused on security and emergency response than on community interaction and problem solving. This transition marks the beginning of Officer Walsh's shift, when the character of police work changes to emphasize observation, documentation, and readiness to respond to the unexpected situations that can develop when fewer people are present to witness or report problems as they emerge. The night hours reveal different aspects of Millbrook's character, when the town's essential personality becomes more apparent without the distractions of daytime activity and traffic. Street lights create pools of illumination that define pathways and highlight architectural features. Shadows take on greater significance as potential concealment for unwanted activities. And the sounds of night become more important indicators of conditions requiring attention or investigation. Officer Walsh has developed sensitivity to these nighttime patterns, learning to distinguish between normal nocturnal sounds and those that might indicate problems developing beyond the range of immediate observation. Her patrol routes take advantage of elevated locations that provide views across residential areas, and she has identified observation points where she can monitor multiple areas simultaneously, while remaining available to respond quickly to calls or radio. Communications. The records maintained by the night shift officers provide detailed documentation of conditions during the hours when most community members are asleep and unaware of activities that might affect their security or the safety of their property. These reports create a continuous narrative of nighttime conditions that supplements the daytime observations recorded by other officers, forming a comprehensive picture of community life during all hours of the day and night. This comprehensive documentation serves multiple purposes beyond immediate law enforcement needs, creating historical records that help identify long-term patterns and trends, providing background information for planning and policy decisions, and establishing baseline conditions that enable recognition of changes that might require attention or intervention. The accumulation of these records over years and decades creates an archive that documents not only criminal activities and public safety concerns, but also the broader social and economic patterns that define community life in a small rural town. The filing system that organizes these records continues to evolve as Ms. Morrison develops more efficient methods for categorizing and cross-referencing information, ensuring that valuable observations and details remain accessible for future reference while maintaining the security and confidentiality protections required for law enforcement records. Her work creates a resource that serves the immediate needs of police operations while building an archive that documents the ongoing history of Millbrook and its residents. As the first volume of this extended narrative draws to its close, the foundation has been established for exploring the deeper patterns and more complex relationships that define police work in a small community where every incident connects to broader networks of social interaction, economic activity, and historical continuity. The quiet routines of daily police operations provide the structure within which more significant stories will unfold, stories that reveal how careful observation and patient documentation create understanding that serves both immediate practical needs and longer-term community interests. The records room in the basement of the police station contains the materials from which these stories emerge, files and reports that document decades of human experience in a small town where individual actions and community patterns intersect in ways that require careful attention and thoughtful analysis to understand fully. The officers who patrol the streets and respond to calls provide the daily observations that feed into this larger understanding, their reports contributing to a comprehensive picture of community life that extends far beyond simple crime statistics or incident summaries. In the quiet hours of night shift patrol, when Officer Walsh drives through empty streets and observes the settled community from her unique perspective, the stage is set for the deeper explorations that will follow in subsequent volumes, where the routine observations and careful documentation of daily police work reveal patterns and connections that speak to fundamental questions about human nature, community responsibility, and the ongoing challenge of maintaining social order in a complex and constantly changing world. Asterisk. The morning shift begins with the methodical ritual of reviewing overnight reports, a process that Officer Sarah Chun has refined over her 8 years with the Millbrook Police Department. She arrives each day at 6:45, 15 minutes before her official start time, using these quiet moments to prepare for the day ahead while the building still holds the peaceful atmosphere of night. The overnight officer's report sits on her desk, handwritten in the careful script that all officers learn to use for documentation that might someday be scrutinized in legal proceedings. Officer Patricia Walsh completed her patrol at 5:57 that morning, noting in her final entry that she had conducted routine checks of the business district, residential areas, and the industrial zone near the railroad tracks. Her report recorded 3 radio contacts with dispatch, 2 routine location checks, and 1 response to an automatic alarm at the hardware store that proved false, when she discovered a loose window blind triggering the motion sensor. The details of her night patrol painted a picture of Millbrook in its most peaceful state, when only the occasional freight train or distant traffic on the state highway interrupted the quiet that settled over the community during the hours between midnight and dawn. Chun begins her own patrol at 7:15. After completing the administrative tasks that transition responsibility from night to day shift operations, her route follows a pattern established through years of experience, beginning with the business district where shop owners are arriving to open their establishments and prepare for the day's activities. The hardware store owner, Mr. Franklin Weber, waves from behind the glass door as he disables the alarm system that triggered the false alert during the night. Chun makes a mental note to include this interaction in her daily report, part of the detailed documentation that creates continuity between shifts and ensures that all officers remain informed about ongoing situations and community concerns. The patrol car moves slowly along Main Street, where morning light filters through the oak trees that line the sidewalks and creates shifting patterns of shadow and illumination across the storefronts and parked cars. Chun observes the daily transformation as Millbrook awakens, lights appearing in windows above the commercial spaces where apartment dwellers begin their morning routines, delivery trucks arriving with supplies for the restaurants and retail establishments, and the gradual increase in pedestrian traffic as residents venture out for morning errands or early appointments. At the diner, she stops briefly to chat with Betty Morrison, the morning waitress whose 30-year tenure makes her an unofficial source of community information and local news. Morrison mentions that the Henderson family returned from their vacation in Colorado 2 days earlier than expected, noting this detail because Chun had been conducting extra security checks of their house on Maple Street during their absence. These informal communications form an essential part of community policing in a small town, where residents and business owners serve as additional eyes and ears for law enforcement while maintaining the neighborly relationships that define small-town social structure. Chun's patrol continues through the residential neighborhoods where children wait at bus stops for the school transportation that will carry them to classes beginning at 8:30. She recognizes most of the children by sight, if not by name, and her presence provides reassurance to parents who appreciate visible law enforcement during the vulnerable moments when their children gather in small groups on street corners and in front yards. The school bus route follows a predictable schedule that Chun has memorized, allowing her to coordinate her patrol timing to provide security coverage during pickup times while avoiding interference with the bus driver's carefully planned route through the neighborhood streets. The elementary school generates its own patterns of activity that require police attention during morning hours, as parents drop off children who miss the bus or arrive early for special programs and activities. Chun parks near the school entrance during peak arrival times, providing traffic control assistance while observing the interactions between children, parents, and school personnel that sometimes reveal concerns requiring follow-up attention. Her reports often include observations about family dynamics, unusual behavior patterns, or situations that might benefit from informal intervention before they develop into more serious problems. Officer James Rodriguez assumes patrol duties at 3 in the afternoon, beginning his shift with a review of Chun's daily report and any messages or concerns that accumulated during the morning and early afternoon hours. His patrol route emphasizes the areas where afternoon and evening activities create the highest potential for problems, requiring police attention. The park behind the library where teenagers gather after school, the residential neighborhoods, where children play outdoors during the hours before dinner, and the business district where afternoon shoppers and early dinner customers begin to create increased pedestrian and vehicle traffic. The park requires particular attention during afternoon hours, when students released from school often congregate in groups that can generate noise complaints from nearby residents or engage in activities that push the boundaries of acceptable public behavior. Rodriguez has learned to distinguish between normal adolescent socializing and gatherings that might require intervention, understanding that his presence serves more as a deterrent and reassurance than as active enforcement. His approach emphasizes communication and relationship building, recognizing that positive interactions with young people during routine encounters can prevent more serious problems from developing later. The residential patrol during afternoon hours reveals the community in its most active domestic phase, when families return from work and school and begin the evening routines that occupy the hours before bedtime. Rodriguez observes children playing in yards and on sidewalks, neighbors chatting across fence lines or from adjacent porches, and the gradual increase in household activities that create the sounds and movements of a community transitioning from the structured activities of work and education to the more relaxed patterns of family life. His reports document these observations with the detailed attention to social patterns that Chief Holloway encouraged from all officers, recognizing that understanding normal community rhythms is essential for identifying situations that deviate from expected patterns and might require police attention. Rodriguez notes which houses typically show activity during particular hours, which residents maintain regular schedules that can serve as informal neighborhood security, and which areas experience variations in activity levels that might indicate developing concerns or changing circumstances. The evening hours bring different responsibilities and observation opportunities, as Rodriguez's patrol extends into the time when restaurants and taverns begin to serve dinner customers and social activities shift from outdoor family settings to indoor gatherings at commercial establishments. Murphy's Tavern requires periodic attention during evening hours, not because of frequent problems, but because alcohol service creates potential for situations that might require police intervention if they escalate beyond the informal management capabilities of staff and regular customers. Rodriguez has developed a cooperative relationship with the tavern's owner and staff, stopping by regularly during evening hours to maintain visibility and gather information about any concerns or unusual activities they might have observed. These visits serve multiple purposes: demonstrating police presence that can deter potential problems, maintaining communication channels that provide early warning about developing situations, and reinforcing the collaborative relationship between law enforcement and business owners that characterizes effective community policing in small-town settings. The transition to night shift at 11 brings Officer Patricia Walsh back on duty, beginning the cycle that will continue until morning, when Chun arrives to start another day of community policing and routine patrol activities. Walsh's night shift responsibilities emphasize security monitoring, emergency response readiness, and the careful observation of community conditions during the hours when most residents sleep and fewer people are available to witness or report unusual activities. Her patrol route during night hours takes advantage of elevated locations and strategic observation points that provide views across multiple areas simultaneously, allowing her to monitor residential neighborhoods, commercial districts, and industrial areas while maintaining rapid response capability for emergency calls. The night hours reveal different aspects of Millbrook's character, when artificial lighting creates distinct patterns of visibility and shadow, and when the sounds of human activity give way to the subtler noises of a community at rest. Walsh has learned to read these nighttime patterns with the expertise that comes from years of experience observing the community during its most vulnerable hours. She recognizes the difference between normal nocturnal sounds and those that might indicate problems developing beyond immediate sight. Understands how weather conditions affect visibility and safety during night patrols, and maintains awareness of the seasonal changes that influence nighttime activity patterns and security concerns. The radio communications during night shift create a different rhythm than daytime operations, with longer periods of silence interrupted by routine location checks and status reports that maintain contact between the patrol officer and the dispatcher monitoring radio traffic from the station. These communications serve both operational and safety purposes, ensuring that help can be dispatched quickly if needed, while documenting the officer's activities and observations for the permanent record that chronicles police operations during all hours of day and night. Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell, working her rotation as night dispatcher, brings her knitting to pass the quiet hours between radio contacts and emergency calls. Her needles click softly in the background as Walsh reports her location during routine patrol checks, creating a rhythmic accompaniment to the radio communications that maintain the vital connection between the patrol officer and the station. Hartwell has developed intuitive understanding of normal night shift patterns, recognizing when extended silence might indicate problems with radio equipment or situations that require attention beyond routine patrol. Activities. The records room in the basement of the police station contains files that document decades of these routine patrol activities, creating an archive that reveals long-term patterns and trends in community life that extend far beyond immediate law enforcement concerns. Ms. Janet Morrison, the civilian clerk responsible for maintaining the filing system, has organized these records to facilitate research and reference activities that serve ongoing police operations while preserving historical information about community development and social change. The oldest files in the archive date to the establishment of the police department in 1962, when Millbrook's growing population and changing social conditions necessitated formal law enforcement services beyond the part-time sheriff's deputy, who had previously provided limited police coverage for the area. These early files document the transition from rural law enforcement focused primarily on agricultural concerns to community policing that addressed the more complex social dynamics of a growing town with diverse economic activities and changing demographic patterns. The filing system reflects the evolution of police record-keeping practices over the decades, with early reports handwritten on standard forms that provided limited space for detailed observations, and later, records typed on improved forms that allowed more comprehensive documentation of incidents and investigations. The most recent files utilize computer-generated reports that facilitate cross-referencing and data analysis while maintaining the detailed narrative style that Chief Holloway considers essential for effective police operations in a small community setting. Morrison reviews these older files regularly as part of her responsibility for maintaining the archive and ensuring that historical information remains accessible for current police operations. Her work sometimes reveals connections between past and present incidents that might escape notice during routine daily activities, providing context that helps officers understand developing situations or recognize patterns that might require special attention or investigation. The archive contains several categories of files that document different aspects of police operations over the years. Incident reports form the largest category, documenting responses to calls for service and recording observations from routine patrol activities. Traffic accident reports create another substantial file category, reflecting the ongoing responsibility for investigating accidents and maintaining road safety in a community where state highways and local roads intersect with agricultural traffic and seasonal variations in driving conditions. Property crime files document theft reports, vandalism incidents, and burglary investigations that typically involve small-scale crimes affecting individual residents or businesses rather than organized criminal enterprises. These files often reveal patterns related to economic conditions, seasonal activities, or social changes that influence crime rates and community security concerns over extended periods. Domestic disturbance files reflect the ongoing police responsibility for responding to family conflicts and relationship disputes that sometimes require intervention to prevent escalation into more serious violence or legal violations. These files often document repeated contacts with particular families or individuals, creating records that help officers understand background circumstances and develop appropriate response strategies for future incidents. Missing person files, though relatively rare in a small community like Millbrook, document searches for individuals who disappear under circumstances that cause concern for family members or friends. These files typically involve teenagers who leave home without permission, elderly residents who become confused or disoriented, or adults whose unexpected absence creates worry about possible accidents or medical emergencies. Morrison has developed expertise in recognizing connections between different types of files that might not be apparent during routine filing activities. Her comprehensive knowledge of the archive enables her to identify patterns that span different categories of incidents or extend across time periods that might otherwise obscure important relationships between seemingly unrelated events. The evidence room adjacent to the records archive contains physical items collected during investigations over the years, creating a tangible complement to the paper records that document police activities and community incidents. Most evidence consists of routine materials, photographs from accident scenes, personal items recovered during investigations, and miscellaneous objects that were collected as potential evidence but proved irrelevant to case outcomes. Some evidence has remained in storage for years, related to cases that were resolved, but where items could not be returned to their owners or were retained as insurance against possible appeals or related legal proceedings. These accumulated objects create a physical archive that parallels the paper records, documenting material aspects of community life and law enforcement activities that supplement the written descriptions contained in incident reports and investigation files. The oldest evidence dates to the early years of the department and includes items that seem almost quaint by current standards. Analog cameras, mechanical tools, clothing styles that mark specific decades with unmistakable precision. Morrison conducts periodic reviews of the evidence inventory, identifying items that have exceeded mandatory retention periods and can be disposed of according to departmental procedures. But she approaches this task carefully, knowing that seemingly insignificant objects sometimes prove relevant to ongoing investigations or cold cases that remain officially open despite years of inactivity. Chief Holloway maintains regular communication with her counterparts in surrounding communities, participating in monthly meetings where police chiefs and sheriff's deputies share information about regional concerns and coordinate responses to situations that might affect multiple jurisdictions. These meetings typically address routine administrative matters, but occasionally reveal patterns of activity that suggest coordination or movement of criminal enterprises between communities, requiring more detailed communication and cooperation than normal police operations. The radio system that connects the Millbrook Police Department with regional law enforcement agencies operates on shared frequencies that allow officers to monitor activities in adjacent areas and request assistance when situations exceed the capabilities of the small department. This regional communication network serves as an early warning system for problems that might eventually affect Millbrook, while providing access to specialized resources and expertise that supplement local law enforcement capabilities. Officer Matthews, who has developed expertise in communications technology, maintains the radio equipment and ensures that all officers receive proper training in radio protocols and emergency procedures. His responsibilities include monitoring radio traffic from other jurisdictions during quiet periods, learning about situations developing in nearby communities, and occasionally recognizing names or locations that might relate to previous incidents in Millbrook. The geographic location of Millbrook provides both advantages and challenges for police operations, with the town's position approximately 15 miles from the county seat, allowing convenient coordination with sheriff's deputies and county services while maintaining sufficient distance to preserve the community's distinct identity and self-reliant character. The state highway that passes near Millbrook provides convenient access to regional transportation networks, while allowing the town to avoid problems associated with heavy through traffic that might affect community security or quality of life. 2 smaller roads connect Millbrook to neighboring communities, creating transportation links that require regular patrol attention during certain seasons and weather conditions. The road following Miller's Creek toward the east experiences increased traffic during summer months when recreational activities draw visitors to the creek and surrounding woodland areas. The western road that climbs through hills to connect with county road networks serves agricultural traffic during planting and harvest seasons, requiring attention to ensure that heavy farm equipment operates safely on roads designed primarily for passenger vehicle traffic. The railroad tracks that originally brought settlers to Millbrook continue to serve freight traffic, with trains passing through several times daily carrying agricultural products and manufactured goods between distant cities. The trains no longer stop in Millbrook, passenger service having been discontinued in the 1960s, but the tracks and adjacent railroad right-of-way require occasional police attention when trespassers or vandals create problems that could affect train operations or public safety. Officer Chun has developed expertise in rail-related issues, maintaining contact with railroad police who have jurisdiction over the tracks themselves, but often require local assistance for problems that extend beyond the immediate right-of-way. She has learned to recognize the schedules of regular freight runs and can identify unusual train activity that might indicate problems requiring attention or investigation. The residential areas of Millbrook reflect the town's gradual growth over many decades, with established neighborhoods near the town center featuring houses built during the early and mid-20th century, and newer subdivisions on the outskirts, containing more contemporary homes constructed as the community slowly expanded to accommodate population growth and changing housing preferences. The older neighborhoods generate most of the calls that occupy police officers during daytime hours, reflecting the social dynamics of areas where families have lived for multiple generations, and where residents maintain detailed knowledge of normal activity patterns and social relationships. These established residential areas typically produce calls related to neighbor disputes over property boundaries or noise levels, reports of suspicious activity that usually involve unfamiliar visitors or unusual activity patterns, and requests for assistance with problems that fall between genuine emergencies and simple inconveniences. Chun has learned to navigate these situations with patience and diplomacy, understanding that her response often matters less for its immediate practical effect than for its demonstration that the police department remains accessible and responsive to citizen concerns. Her approach emphasizes communication and informal problem solving, recognizing that formal legal action might damage community relationships while failing to address underlying concerns that generate repeated complaints or conflicts. The newer residential areas tend to generate different types of calls, often related to the social dynamics of families adjusting to new surroundings and neighbors still becoming acquainted with each other. These areas typically house younger residents, families with children, and people who commute to work in larger communities, but chose Millbrook for its quiet character and affordable housing options. Calls from newer neighborhoods often involve minor traffic concerns related to increased residential density, complaints about children's activities in areas where established play patterns have not yet developed, and requests for increased patrols during vacation periods when houses remain unoccupied for extended periods. These situations require different approaches than those used in established neighborhoods, often involving education about community expectations and assistance with developing Informal agreements between neighbors who lack the historical relationships that facilitate conflict resolution in older residential areas. Downtown Millbrook consists primarily of the 12 blocks of Main Street, with additional businesses located on cross streets that intersect the main commercial corridor. The business district includes establishments that serve both local residents and occasional visitors. The hardware store that has operated continuously since the 1940s, restaurants that cater to different clienteles and price ranges, a pharmacy that also serves as an informal community bulletin board, and specialty shops that depend largely on local customers for their economic viability. Murphy's Tavern occupies a building that began as a hotel in the 1890s and gradually evolved into its current role as the town's primary gathering place for social drinking and informal community meetings. The establishment operates with the self-regulating atmosphere common in small towns, where most customers know each other and problems rarely escalate beyond minor disagreements that resolve themselves without requiring police intervention. The diner serves as another informal community center, particularly during breakfast and lunch hours, when local residents, business owners, and occasional visitors gather over coffee and meals. The establishment's central location and extended hours make it a natural gathering place for information exchange, and the staff often possess detailed knowledge about local activities, visiting strangers, and unusual occurrences that might interest police officers seeking to understand developing situations or gather background information about ongoing concerns. Rodriguez has cultivated relationships with employees at both establishments, stopping by regularly during his afternoon and evening shifts to maintain visibility and gather information about any concerns or observations that might prove relevant to police operations. These informal contacts provide early warning about developing problems and help maintain the community policing approach that works effectively in small town settings where personal relationships facilitate communication and cooperation between law enforcement and community members. The library, housed in a Carnegie building constructed in 1911, serves as both an educational resource and a community gathering place, particularly for teenagers and elderly residents who use it as a quiet retreat during daytime hours. The building's architecture and central location make it a natural focal point for downtown activity, and the library staff often observe activities throughout the business district from their windows overlooking Main Street and the adjacent park. Ms. Patricia Eldridge, the head librarian, has worked at the Millbrook Library for over 20 years and maintains detailed knowledge about local families, their histories, and their current circumstances. She often serves as an informal information resource for police officers investigating situations that might benefit from background knowledge about individuals or families involved in various incidents. Her assistance operates within appropriate boundaries of confidentiality and privacy, but she understands the value of providing context that helps officers respond appropriately to situations involving community members. The park adjacent to the library consists of approximately 2 acres of open space, mature trees, and walking paths that connect the downtown area with residential neighborhoods beyond. During daylight hours, the park serves families with young children, elderly residents who use the walking paths for exercise, and students who gather after school hours. Evening brings different users: teenagers seeking gathering places away from adult supervision, adults walking dogs or exercising after work, and occasional individuals seeking quiet solitude, outdoor settings. Rodriguez includes the park in his regular patrol route, making periodic stops to maintain visibility and ensure that activities remain within acceptable bounds. His presence serves more as reassurance than enforcement, since serious problems rarely develop in such an open and visible location. However, he has learned to recognize the difference between normal social activity and gatherings that might eventually require intervention, maintaining relationships with regular park users who can provide information about unusual activities or concerning behavior patterns. the municipal building housing city offices in town. Council chambers sits across the street from the police station, facilitating coordination between law enforcement and other city departments. Mayor Robert Chun maintains a cooperative relationship with Chief Holloway on matters affecting public safety and law enforcement operations, participating in regular meetings where municipal concerns are discussed and policies are coordinated to ensure effective service delivery to community residents. The city clerk, Mrs. Dorothy Walsh, maintains records related to business licenses, building permits, and other administrative matters that occasionally intersect with police operations. Her familiarity with property ownership, business operations, and civic activities provides valuable background information when officers investigate incidents involving commercial properties or public events that require special security attention or traffic control assistance. The volunteer fire department operates from a station located 3 blocks from the police station, close enough to facilitate coordination for emergency responses, but separate enough to maintain independent operations. The 18 active members respond to structure fires, vehicle accidents, medical emergencies, and various situations requiring specialized equipment or expertise. Fire Chief Robert Martinez has developed effective working relationships with the police department for situations requiring joint response, and his dual role as a mechanic at the local automotive repair shop provides additional community connections that support cooperative emergency services. Emergency medical services for Millbrook are provided by the County Ambulance Service, with the nearest ambulance stationed approximately 10 miles away at the county hospital. Response times for medical emergencies typically range from 12 to 20 minutes, depending on weather conditions and crew availability, which means that police officers often serve as first responders for medical situations until professional medical personnel arrive on scene. Walsh has completed advanced first aid training and carries emergency medical supplies in her patrol car, recognizing that night shift duties might require providing initial medical assistance for heart attacks, injuries from accidents, or other situations where immediate response could prove critical. She has responded to several medical emergencies during her years with the department, and her reports of these incidents provide detailed documentation of circumstances and actions taken prior to the arrival of professional medical crews. The town's medical services consist of a small clinic staffed by Dr. Margaret Foster, who moved to Millbrook 15 years ago after completing her residency at the county hospital. The clinic operates during regular daytime hours and provides basic medical services for routine health maintenance and minor injuries or illnesses. Dr. Foster also serves as informal coordinator for public health concerns that might affect the broader community, maintaining communication with the police department regarding situations that might have public safety implications. During evening and weekend hours, residents requiring medical attention must travel to the county hospital or contact ambulance services for transport to appropriate facilities. This arrangement works adequately for most situations, but occasionally creates complications for police officers dealing with incidents involving injured or intoxicated individuals who require medical evaluation but might not meet criteria for emergency ambulance transport. The school system serves approximately 600 students from kindergarten through 12th grade, with elementary classes housed in a building constructed in the 1950s and secondary students attending classes in a newer facility built in the 1980s when enrollment growth necessitated expanded capacity. The schools generate occasional calls for police assistance, typically involving minor disciplinary matters, parking problems during events, or security concerns related to after-hours activities. Matthews serves as the department's liaison with school administrators, attending safety meetings and coordinating responses to situations that might require police presence at school events or during regular school hours. His background in community policing and familiarity with many local families make him particularly effective in handling situations involving students, and his regular presence at school events helps maintain positive relationships between law enforcement and the educational community. Agricultural areas surrounding Millbrook consist of family farms that have operated for multiple generations, producing corn and soybeans and raising cattle on land that has remained in the same family since original settlement periods. These rural properties generate occasional calls for police assistance, theft of equipment or livestock, trespassing incidents, disputes over property boundaries or access rights, and accidents involving agricultural machinery on public roads. Rodriguez has developed familiarity with the farming community through patrol, duties on rural roads, and attendance at community events where farmers and town residents interact. He understands the seasonal rhythms of agricultural work and recognizes how farming activities affect traffic patterns, noise levels, and other concerns that might generate complaints or require police response. The relationship between town residents and the farming community reflects the broader character of Millbrook as a place where different lifestyles and economic interests coexist with minimal conflict. Farmers depend on town businesses for supplies and services, while town residents benefit from economic activity and scenic rural landscape that farming maintains. Police officers serve as intermediaries when conflicts arise, helping to resolve disputes through communication and compromise, rather than formal legal proceedings that might damage long-term community relationships. Industrial activity in the Millbrook area consists primarily of a grain elevator complex near the railroad tracks, a small manufacturing facility that produces agricultural equipment, and several automotive repair and service businesses. These enterprises generate employment for local residents and contribute to the tax base that supports municipal services. But they also create potential sources of complaints related to noise, traffic, and environmental concerns that require ongoing attention from police officers and city administrators. The grain elevator operates during harvest seasons with extended hours and increased truck traffic that can affect nearby residential areas. Chun monitors these operations during busy periods, ensuring that traffic flows smoothly and that noise levels remain within acceptable limits during evening and early morning hours when residential areas require quiet for sleep and rest. As this second volume draws to its close, the daily rhythms and routine observations that define police work in Millbrook have been established as the foundation for deeper understanding of community patterns and relationships. The careful documentation of patrol activities, the systematic maintenance of records and evidence, and the ongoing relationships between officers and community members create the framework within which more complex stories will emerge. Stories that reveal the subtle connections between individual incidents and broader social patterns that shape life in a small town where everyone's actions affect the larger community in ways both obvious and hidden. Asterisk. The filing cabinet in the far corner of the records room contains what Ms. Janet Morrison privately refers to as the miscellaneous cases, reports that document incidents which never quite fit into the standard categories of traffic violations, domestic disturbances, or criminal investigations. These files accumulate slowly over the years, each one representing a moment when a citizen contacted the police department about something that seemed important enough to warrant official attention, but unusual enough to defy easy classification. The oldest file in this collection dates to September 1974, when Mrs. Helen Bradshaw called to report that someone had moved her garden gnome from its position beside her front steps to a location approximately 3 feet to the left. Officer Kenneth Walsh, Patricia Walsh's late father-in-law, responded to the call and documented his findings in a report that noted the gnome's new position, the absence of any obvious footprints or other evidence of disturbance, and Mrs. Bradshaw's certainty that she had not moved the ornament herself. The report concluded with the observation that no crime appeared to have been committed, but that the incident had been documented at the citizens' request. Similar reports appear intermittently throughout the decades, documenting incidents that residents found concerning enough to contact police, but which investigations revealed to be minor mysteries rather than criminal activities. Garden ornaments discovered in unexpected locations, lawn furniture rearranged during the night, flower pots moved from porches to sidewalks, and decorative items relocated from front yards to backyards. Each incident, considered individually, represented nothing more than an oddity that might be explained by pranksters, strong winds, or simple misremembering on the part of property owners. Morrison has read through these files numerous times over her 15 years managing the police department's records, initially dismissing them as curiosities that occupied filing space but served little useful purpose. However, her systematic approach to organizing and cross-referencing police reports gradually revealed patterns that suggested these incidents might not be as random or insignificant as they initially appeared. The reports cluster around certain time periods, with extended gaps of months or even years between incidents, followed by periods when multiple reports arrive within days or weeks of each other. The locations also show patterns, with most incidents occurring in the older residential neighborhoods near downtown, particularly along Maple Street, Oak Avenue, and the 3 blocks of Elm Street that connect the residential areas with the business district. Officer Sarah Chung first noticed these patterns during a quiet afternoon when she was reviewing old files to familiarize herself with the types of incidents that had occurred in areas she patrolled regularly. Her systematic reading of reports from the previous decade revealed a concentration of minor property disturbances that seemed to follow seasonal patterns, with most incidents occurring during late spring and early autumn when residents spent more time outdoors and were likely to notice changes in their yard arrangements. Chun brought these observations to Chief Holloway's attention during a routine briefing meeting, suggesting that the pattern might warrant closer examination even though individual incidents appeared trivial. Chief Holloway encouraged Chun to develop a more detailed analysis of these reports, recognizing that community policing effectiveness depends on understanding all aspects of local activity patterns, not just those involving obvious criminal behavior. The analysis revealed additional patterns that had not been apparent from casual reading of individual reports. The incidents occurred almost exclusively on properties owned by elderly residents, particularly those who lived alone and maintained elaborate gardens or extensive collections of outdoor decorations. The timing of incidents suggested coordination rather than random occurrence, with multiple reports often filed within the same week, but from properties located in different neighborhoods that would not be visible from each other. More intriguingly, follow-up visits to properties where incidents had been reported often revealed that items had been returned to their original positions, sometimes within days of the initial displacement. Residents frequently called to report that missing items had reappeared or that relocated objects had been moved back to their usual places, but these follow-up reports rarely received the same level of documentation as the original complaints. Chief Holloway assigned Officer James Rodriguez to conduct a more comprehensive investigation of these patterns, beginning with interviews of residents who had filed reports about missing or displaced items. Rodriguez approached this assignment with the careful attention to detail that characterized his approach to all police work, understanding that seemingly minor incidents sometimes revealed more significant concerns when examined systematically. His interviews revealed information that had not appeared in the original incident reports. Several residents mentioned seeing unfamiliar individuals in their neighborhoods during periods around the times when incidents occurred, but these observations had not seemed significant enough to report initially. The descriptions varied in detail and specificity, but they often included references to someone walking slowly through neighborhoods during evening hours, someone who seemed to be observing houses and yards rather than simply passing through the area. Mrs. Dorothy Kellerman, who lived on Oak Avenue and had reported 3 separate incidents over a 2-year period, mentioned that her neighbor, Mrs. Hazel Morrison, had also noticed unusual evening activity in the area. Mrs. Morrison, who was not related to Janet Morrison at the police department, despite sharing a surname, confirmed that she had observed someone walking through the neighborhood on several occasions during twilight hours, always alone and always moving at a pace that suggested careful observation rather than purposeful transportation to a specific destination. Asterisk. Rodriguez documented these interviews carefully, noting that residents seemed reluctant to describe their observations as suspicious but were willing to discuss them when asked direct questions about unusual activities they might have noticed. The pattern suggested that someone was conducting regular surveillance of certain neighborhoods, focusing attention on properties that displayed valuable or interesting outdoor items. The interviews also revealed that many incidents involved more than simple displacement of objects. Garden tools disappeared from sheds and reappeared days later in different locations on the same properties. Decorative items were not just moved, but rearranged in patterns that suggested deliberate artistic intent, rather than random relocation. Flower pots were replanted with different varieties of flowers, always with plants that were appropriate for the season and growing conditions, but different from what the property owners had originally planted. These details suggested a level of planning and horticultural knowledge that went beyond simple pranks or random vandalism. Someone was investing considerable time and effort in these activities, demonstrating familiarity with gardening practices and aesthetic principles that indicated more sophisticated motivation than teenage mischief or casual property interference. Rodriguez expanded his investigation to include abandoned properties in the Millbrook area, reasoning that someone conducting regular neighborhood surveillance might also be interested in houses that stood empty and unmonitored. The town contained several such properties, ranging from houses that had been vacant for short periods due to family relocations or estate settlements to buildings that had remained empty for years due to economic factors or ownership disputes. Hendrick's house on Pine Street had been vacant for 18 months following the death of its elderly owner and ongoing legal proceedings among distant relatives who disagreed about the property's disposition. Neighbors reported seeing lights in the windows during evening hours, but utility company records confirmed that electrical service had been disconnected shortly after the owner's death. Investigation revealed that battery-powered lanterns were being used to provide illumination, but no evidence of forced entry or property damage could be found. Similar reports came from neighbors of the old Patterson farmhouse on the outskirts of town, which had been empty for 3 years since the family moved to assisted living facilities in the county seat. The house sat on 5 acres of land that included outbuildings and a large garden area that had returned to wild growth. Neighbors mentioned seeing smoke from the chimney on cold evenings, but investigation revealed no signs of occupancy and no indication that the heating system had been activated. The Wagner property on Elm Street presented a more complex situation, as the house had been abandoned for nearly 5 years following a family dispute that left ownership unclear and the property unmaintained. The yard had become overgrown, the roof leaked in several places, and windows had been broken by weather or vandalism. However, neighbors reported that the garden area behind the house appeared to be receiving regular maintenance, with weeds cleared and new plants appearing despite the absence of any visible caretaking activity. Officer Patricia Walsh, whose night shift duties provided opportunities for detailed observation of these properties during hours when any unauthorized activity would be most likely to occur, began including regular checks of abandoned houses in her patrol routine. Her reports documented subtle signs of activity that might escape notice during daytime hours, paths through overgrown areas that suggested regular foot traffic, garden tools leaning against buildings in positions that indicated recent use, and window coverings that appeared to be adjusted periodically to control visibility from outside. Walsh's observations revealed that the Wagner property showed the most consistent signs of unauthorized activity. Vehicle tracks in the overgrown driveway appeared fresh despite the absence of any legitimate reason for vehicles to access the property. The garden area showed clear evidence of ongoing cultivation, with vegetables planted in neat rows and maintained with professional-level horticultural practices. A small shed in the backyard contained gardening tools and supplies that appeared new despite the property's abandoned status. The investigation of these abandoned properties led to discoveries that connected them to the reports of displaced garden items in residential neighborhoods. Decorative objects that had been reported missing from private properties were found stored in outbuildings on abandoned properties, carefully organized and maintained as if they were part of a systematic collection. Garden tools that had disappeared from residential properties were discovered in the sheds and storage areas of vacant houses, often cleaned and organized more meticulously than they had been maintained by their original owners. The discovery of these collections prompted Chief Holloway to authorize expanded surveillance of the abandoned properties, using motion-activated cameras and other monitoring equipment to document activity that occurred beyond the range of regular patrol observations. The surveillance revealed the presence of an individual who appeared regularly at different abandoned properties during evening and early morning hours, always alone and always conducting activities that suggested long-term planning and systematic approach to property maintenance and cultivation. The surveillance footage showed someone who moved through the properties with obvious familiarity, following established routines that indicated extensive knowledge of the buildings and grounds. The individual maintained gardens, repaired damage to outbuildings, and organized collected items with care that suggested emotional attachment to the properties and their improvement. The activities appeared to follow seasonal patterns, with different types of work conducted at different properties depending on weather conditions and growing seasons. Analysis of the surveillance footage revealed that the individual was an elderly man whose appearance suggested local residence rather than transient activity. His clothing was appropriate for outdoor work but well maintained, and his movements indicated familiarity with the local area and comfort with the activities he was conducting. He appeared to be in good physical condition despite his apparent age, and his work habits suggested experience with agricultural and horticultural practices. Chief Holloway decided that direct contact would be more appropriate than continued surveillance, reasoning that the activities being observed did not constitute criminal behavior in any traditional sense and might represent a situation where community assistance would be more effective than law enforcement action. She assigned Rodriguez to approach the individual during one of his regular visits to the Wagner property, with instructions to conduct the contact as an informal conversation rather than a criminal investigation. Rodriguez encountered the man on a Thursday evening in late October, during the autumn period when gardening activities typically focus on harvest and preparation for winter weather. The man was working in the garden area behind the Wagner house, carefully harvesting vegetables that he placed in wooden crates that appeared to have been constructed specifically for this purpose. Rodriguez approached openly, identifying himself as a police officer, but explaining that he was investigating reports about property activities rather than responding to complaints about criminal behavior. Man identified himself as Thomas Garrett, age 73, a retired agricultural extension agent who had lived in Millbrook for over 40 years before moving to a senior living facility in the county seat 2 years earlier. Garrett explained that he had received permission from property owners to maintain gardens and buildings on abandoned properties, claiming that he had contacted owners through attorney representatives and received verbal authorization for his activities. Garrett's explanation revealed a complex network of informal agreements and personal relationships that had developed over many years of community involvement. He had worked with many local families during his career as an extension agent, providing advice about agricultural practices and helping residents develop productive gardens and maintain their properties effectively. His retirement and subsequent move to senior living facilities had created a sense of disconnection from the community, where he had spent most of his adult life. The arrangement Garrett had developed allowed him to continue his agricultural activities while providing maintenance services for properties that might otherwise deteriorate from neglect. He transported vegetables and flowers from the abandoned properties to senior living facilities, sharing his harvests with elderly residents who had limited access to fresh produce. The borrowed garden tools and decorative items were used to improve the abandoned properties, creating productive and attractive spaces that benefited the community even though they remained officially vacant. Rodriguez's report of this contact prompted Chief Holloway to conduct follow-up verification of Garrett's claims about permission from property owners. The verification process revealed that Garrett had indeed made contact with legal representatives for most of the properties, though the extent of formal authorization remained unclear in some cases. The property owners generally expressed appreciation for maintenance activities that prevented deterioration and potential security problems, but none had provided written agreements that clearly authorized Garrett's activities. The situation presented a complex challenge for police administration, as Garrett's activities clearly benefited the community and involved no obvious criminal intent, but occurred without clear legal authorization and involved the use of other people's property without their explicit consent. Chief Holloway decided to work with city administrators and property owners to develop formal agreements that would allow Garrett's activities to continue within appropriate legal frameworks. The resolution of Garrett's situation led to the establishment of a community garden program that provided formal authorization for maintenance activities on abandoned properties, while creating opportunities for other residents to participate in agricultural activities that benefited the broader community. The program addressed both the immediate concerns about unauthorized property use and the longer-term issues related to abandoned property maintenance and community access to fresh produce. The investigation also revealed additional patterns of unusual activity that had not been apparent from individual incident reports. Morrison's analysis of police files identified several other categories of reports that shared characteristics with the missing garden item cases. Reports of vehicles parked in unexpected locations during nighttime hours, observations of individuals conducting activities that seemed purposeful but unexplained, and discoveries of improvements to public spaces that occurred without obvious authorization or coordination. The vehicle reports typically involved cars or trucks observed in rural areas during late evening or early morning hours, parked along roads or in field entrances where they would not normally be expected. Investigation usually revealed that the vehicles belonged to residents of nearby communities who were conducting legitimate activities such as hunting, fishing, or agricultural work, but the timing and locations of these activities sometimes generated concern from residents who were not familiar with rural activity patterns. Officer Walsh, whose night shift duties provided the most opportunities to observe unusual vehicle activity, began maintaining detailed logs of vehicle observations that could be cross-referenced with reports from concerned citizens. Her documentation revealed that most unusual vehicle activity followed predictable patterns related to hunting seasons, fishing conditions, and agricultural schedules, but some observations did not fit these explanations and suggested activities that warranted closer attention. The reports of unexplained individual activity typically involved observations of people walking or working in areas where such activity was unusual, either because of the time of day or the type of location. These reports often came from residents who observed activity from their windows during evening hours or from passing motorists who noticed someone conducting work, activities in locations where such work was not expected. Investigation of these reports usually revealed explanations similar to those found for unusual vehicle activity, legitimate recreational or work activities conducted at times or in locations that were not familiar to the observers who filed the reports. However, The systematic documentation of these reports began to reveal patterns that suggested some activities might involve unauthorized use of private property or coordination between individuals that was not apparent from single observations. The discoveries of unauthorized improvements to public spaces presented different challenges, as these activities clearly benefited the community, but raised questions about liability, safety standards, and coordination with municipal planning processes. Someone had installed benches along walking paths in the park behind the library, using materials and construction techniques that met professional standards, but without authorization from city administrators, who were responsible for park maintenance and public safety. Similar unauthorized improvements appeared at other public locations throughout Millbrook. Flower beds planted in areas of downtown that had previously been bare soil. Trash receptacles installed along walking routes where none had existed before, and minor repairs to public facilities that addressed maintenance needs but were completed without coordination with city maintenance crews. Investigation revealed that these improvements were being made by different individuals, all of whom had skills and experience that enabled them to complete high-quality work that enhanced community facilities. The improvements appeared to be coordinated through informal communication networks that included retired professionals, community volunteers, and residents who had experience with construction, landscaping, and facility maintenance. Chief Holloway worked with city administrators to develop policies that would allow these community improvement activities to continue, while ensuring appropriate coordination and safety oversight. The policies established procedures for residents to propose and implement community improvements that met city standards and contributed to community development goals while protecting the city from liability issues and ensuring that improvements coordinated with official maintenance and development plans. The systematic investigation of these various unusual activity patterns revealed that Millbrook contained an informal network of community-minded individuals who were working independently and in small groups to address maintenance needs, property improvement opportunities, and community enhancement projects that fell outside the scope of official municipal services. The network included retirees who had professional skills and available time, longtime residents who had extensive knowledge of local needs and opportunities, and individuals who had developed strong emotional attachments to the community's appearance and functionality. This informal network operated through communication channels that included casual conversations at community gathering places, coordination through family and friendship relationships, and informal agreements that developed from shared interests and mutual respect. The network's activities complemented official municipal services while addressing needs and opportunities that were not covered by formal programs or budget allocations. The police department's role in these activities evolved from investigation and potential enforcement to facilitation and communication between the informal network and official city administration. Officers began serving as liaison contacts who could help coordinate community improvement activities with city policies and ensure that volunteer efforts contributed to rather than conflicted with official planning and maintenance programs. Morrison's continued analysis of police files revealed that these patterns of community-minded unofficial activity had existed in Millbrook for many years, but had become more extensive and systematic as the community's population of retirees and longtime residents increased. The files documented decades of reports about minor improvements, unauthorized maintenance activities, and community enhancement projects that had been dismissed as isolated incidents, but actually represented consistent patterns of civic engagement that operated outside formal institutional structures. The recognition of these patterns changed the police department's approach to investigating reports of unusual activities, with officers now trained to recognize the difference between potentially criminal behavior and community improvement activities that might benefit from coordination rather than enforcement action. The new approach emphasized communication and problem solving rather than investigation and documentation. though careful record keeping continued to ensure that all activities could be monitored for safety and legal compliance. Officer Chun incorporated this new understanding into her community policing activities, developing relationships with network participants and serving as a communication bridge between unofficial community improvement activities and official city services. Her reports began documenting coordination successes rather than just unusual activities, creating records that demonstrated how informal community networks could enhance rather than complicate official police operations. The transformation of these investigations from enforcement concerns to community coordination opportunities reflected broader changes in the police department's approach to community policing in a small town where residents felt strong ownership of community, appearance and functionality. The cases that had initially appeared to be minor property crimes or unauthorized activities revealed themselves to be expressions of community pride and civic engagement that benefited from police facilitation rather than police intervention. As this third volume draws to its close, the pattern of careful observation and systematic analysis that characterizes effective police work in Millbrook has revealed connections between apparently unrelated incidents that demonstrate the complex social networks and community relationships that define life in a small town. The missing garden items, abandoned house activities, and unauthorized community improvements that initially appeared to be separate concerns have been revealed as different aspects of the same phenomenon. A community of residents who care deeply about their town and work actively to maintain and improve it through informal networks that complement but operate independently of official municipal services. The police files that document these investigations now serve as records of successful community policing initiatives that addressed concerns through communication and coordination rather than enforcement action, creating precedents for future situations where community interests and official procedures might require careful balancing to achieve outcomes that serve both individual rights and collective community welfare. The leather-bound logbooks that Chief Margaret Holloway maintains in her office contain observations that extend beyond the formal incident. Our EPORTS filed in the basement records room. These personal notations, written in her careful handwriting during quiet moments between administrative duties and patrol supervision, document the subtle changes and recurring patterns that define community life in Millbrook across the seasons and years. The logbooks span her 18-year tenure as chief, creating a narrative record that captures the evolution of a small town through the eyes of its primary law enforcement officer. The earliest entries, dating to Chief Holloway's first months in Millbrook, reflect the perspective of someone learning to understand a new community while adapting her previous experience in larger law enforcement operations to the different pace and social dynamics of small-town policing. Her initial observations focused on the formal aspects of police administration, patrol schedules, response times, and the statistical patterns that measured departmental efficiency according to conventional law enforcement standards. Gradually, the entries began to include more detailed observations about community relationships, seasonal activity patterns, and the informal social networks that influenced how residents responded to various situations. Chief Holloway noted which families maintained historical conflicts that occasionally required police mediation, which business owners served as informal community leaders whose opinions influenced public attitudes about municipal policies, and which elderly residents possessed detailed knowledge about local history that could provide context for understanding contemporary situations. The winter of 2010 brought an unusually severe ice storm that left most of Millbrook without electrical power for 5 days, creating conditions that tested both community resilience and police department capabilities. Chief Holloway's logbook entries from this period document how residents organized informal assistance, networks that provided shelter, food, and medical care for vulnerable community members without waiting for official emergency services to coordinate relief, Efforts. The police department served as a communication center during the power outage, using battery-powered radio equipment to maintain contact with county emergency services while coordinating with community volunteers who were providing direct assistance to families and individuals who needed help. Chief Holloway noted that the emergency revealed social networks and community leadership patterns that were not apparent during normal conditions, with some residents emerging as natural organizers while others contributed specialized skills or resources that proved essential for community survival. Officer Daniel Matthews, who was in his third year with the department during the ice storm, demonstrated particular effectiveness in coordinating between official emergency response protocols and informal community assistance activities. Chief Holloway's logbook entries document his ability to work with community volunteers while maintaining appropriate boundaries between police responsibilities and civilian emergency assistance, skills that proved valuable for future emergency situations and community policing activities. The resolution of the ice storm emergency left lasting changes in community social patterns that Chief Holloway continued to document in subsequent logbook entries. Residents who had worked together during the emergency maintained cooperative relationships that influenced how they approached other community challenges, and the experience of successful self-organization during crisis conditions increased community confidence in addressing problems through informal networks rather than depending entirely on official municipal services. These changes became apparent during the following summer when a series of minor incidents tested community patience and police department resources. A family of raccoons took up residence in the attic of Murphy's Tavern, creating noise and odor problems that affected business operations. The family had apparently accessed the building through roof damage that had gone unnoticed since the previous winter, and removal required coordination between animal control services, building contractors, and health department inspectors. Under normal circumstances, such a situation might have generated complaints, disputes about responsibility, and demands for immediate municipal action that could have strained relationships between business owners, city administrators, and service providers. However, the cooperative relationships that had developed during the ice storm emergency enabled residents to organize a collaborative response that addressed the immediate problem while preventing long-term building damage and minimizing disruption to business operations. Chief Holloway's logbook entries document how tavern owner Patrick Murphy worked with neighboring business owners to provide temporary meeting space for the tavern's regular customers while repairs were completed. The hardware store provided materials at cost. Local contractors donated labor for repairs that exceeded the scope of the original raccoon removal, and city administrators expedited inspection processes to minimize business disruption. The incident revealed community problem-solving capabilities that had developed through accumulated experience with informal cooperation and mutual assistance. Chief Holloway noted that her department's role had evolved from primary problem-solving responsibility to facilitation and coordination support, with officers serving as communication links between different groups rather than as the primary agents for resolving community challenges. Similar patterns appeared throughout the decade, with community responses to various situations demonstrating increasing sophistication in informal organization and collaborative problem-solving. When vandalism at the elementary school required replacement of playground equipment, parent groups organized fundraising activities that not only covered repair costs but enabled upgrades that improved recreational facilities beyond their previous condition. The vandalism itself represented a departure from typical patterns in Millbrook, where property damage was usually limited to minor graffiti or accidental damage from adolescent activities. Officer Sarah Chun's investigation revealed that the playground damage had been caused by individuals from outside the community who had apparently targeted the school during a weekend when no activities were scheduled and no residents were likely to observe suspicious activity. Chun's report documented tire tracks that indicated vehicles from outside the local area, based on tire patterns that were not consistent with the types of vehicles typically owned by Millbrook residents. The vandalism technique suggested experience with similar activities, indicating that the perpetrators had likely engaged in comparable property damage in other communities. The investigation expanded to include coordination with law enforcement agencies in surrounding communities, revealing that similar playground vandalism had occurred in 3 other small towns within a 50-mile radius during the previous 2 months. The pattern suggested organized activity by individuals who specifically targeted rural schools and recreational facilities that were isolated from residential areas and unlikely to have security monitoring. Regional coordination led to increased patrol, attention to school and recreational facilities during weekend and evening hours, with officers from multiple departments sharing information about suspicious vehicle activity and unusual behavior patterns. The collaborative investigation demonstrated how small-town police departments could address challenges that exceeded individual departmental capabilities by combining resources and sharing information effectively. The vandalism incidents ceased after 6 weeks of enhanced patrol coverage, though no arrests were made and the specific individuals responsible were never identified. Chief Holloway's logbook entries noted that the regional cooperation developed during this investigation created communication networks that continued to provide benefits for addressing other challenges that affected multiple communities. The autumn of 2012 brought different types of concerns when a series of minor traffic accidents occurred on rural roads surrounding Millbrook during early morning hours when visibility was reduced by seasonal fog conditions. The accidents typically involved single vehicles that left roadways and struck ditches, fence posts, or agricultural equipment, causing property damage but rarely resulting in serious injuries. Officer James Rodriguez, whose patrol duties included the rural road network, conducted detailed investigations of these accidents that revealed patterns suggesting systematic problems rather than random occurrences. The accidents occurred at locations where road conditions changed suddenly due to construction activities, seasonal agricultural operations, or temporary obstacles that were not clearly marked or illuminated for nighttime visibility. Rodriguez's reports documented inadequate warning signs at construction zones, agricultural equipment parked on road shoulders without proper lighting, and seasonal changes in road surfaces that created hazardous conditions during morning fog periods. His investigation identified specific locations where road improvements could prevent future accidents and specific practices that could reduce hazards created by construction and agricultural activities. The accident investigation led to coordination between the police department, county road maintenance services, and agricultural operators that resulted in improved warning systems, better lighting requirements for equipment and obstacles, and modified construction practices that minimize hazards during periods of reduced visibility. The collaborative approach prevented future accidents while maintaining the flexibility that agricultural operations required for seasonal activities. Chief Holloway's logbook entries from this period document her growing understanding of how police work in a small rural community required different approaches than law enforcement in urban settings. Rural policing involved closer integration with agricultural activities, seasonal variations that affected everything from traffic patterns to crime rates, and social networks that enabled collaborative problem solving, but also required careful navigation to maintain appropriate professional boundaries. The winter of 2013 brought an unusual series of reports about suspicious activity at the old grain elevator complex near the railroad tracks. Residents reported seeing lights in buildings that were supposed to be vacant, hearing unusual sounds during nighttime hours, and observing vehicle activity that seemed inconsistent with normal agricultural operations, Officer Patricia Walsh, whose night shift responsibilities included regular checks of the industrial area, began conducting more detailed surveillance of the grain elevator complex. Her observations revealed that the buildings were indeed being used during evening and weekend hours, but investigation showed that the activity was authorized by the property owners who had leased space to a small specialty grain processing operation that was not widely known in the community. The grain processing operation was run by a family that had recently moved to the area from another state, bringing specialized knowledge of organic grain handling and storage techniques that enabled them to serve niche markets for specialty food products. Their operation required evening and weekend work to coordinate with transportation schedules and processing deadlines, but they had not realized that their activity might generate concern from nearby residents. Walsh's investigation led to communication between the grain processing operators and surrounding residents that resolved concerns while educating both groups about the normal activities associated with the specialized operation. The incident demonstrated how community growth and economic development could create unfamiliar activity patterns that required police facilitation to prevent misunderstandings that might affect business operations or community relationships. Chief Holloway noted in her logbook that this incident reflected broader changes occurring in Millbrook as economic conditions encouraged development of specialized agricultural operations, small manufacturing businesses, and service industries that served regional rather than purely local markets. These economic changes brought benefits in terms of employment opportunities and tax revenue, but also required adjustments in community expectations and police approaches to unfamiliar activities. The spring of 2014 brought reports of unusual activity at Miller's Creek, the waterway that flows through the eastern part of Millbrook and provides recreational opportunities for fishing, canoeing, and nature observation. Residents reported seeing individuals conducting activities along the creek banks during early morning hours, apparently collecting specimens or conducting surveys that seemed more systematic than typical recreational activities. Investigation revealed that the creek activity was being conducted by environmental science students from the regional university who were monitoring water quality and aquatic life populations as part of a multi-year study of agricultural impacts on rural waterways. The research had been authorized by property owners and coordinated with state environmental agencies, but the researchers had not realized that their regular presence might generate concern from local residents. The resolution of this situation led to improved communication between the university research programs and local communities, with researchers providing information about their activities to police departments and community leaders in areas where field work was being conducted. The arrangement benefited both the research programs, which gained community cooperation and local knowledge, and the communities, which learned about environmental conditions and research findings that could inform local planning and conservation efforts. Chief Holloway's logbook entries document how these various incidents revealed the increasing complexity of rural community life as Millbrook's connections to regional economic networks, educational institutions, and professional services expanded beyond traditional agricultural and small-town business patterns. The police department's role evolved to include more coordination and communication responsibilities as the communities relationships with outside organizations and activities required ongoing management to prevent misunderstandings and conflicts. Summer of 2015 brought different challenges when the State Highway Department announced plans for road improvements that would affect traffic patterns through Millbrook for several months during construction periods. The project involved upgrading drainage systems and repaving surfaces on the highway segments that provided primary access to the town, requiring temporary traffic diversions that would direct increased vehicle traffic through residential neighborhoods. The construction project required coordination between state highway authorities, city administrators, and the police department to ensure that traffic diversions did not create safety hazards or excessive disruption for residential areas. Chief Holloway worked with project managers to develop traffic control plans that minimized impacts on school bus routes, emergency service access, and business operations while accommodating the construction activities that were necessary for long-term highway improvements. Officer Rodriguez coordinated daily traffic control activities during the construction period, working with construction crews to ensure that traffic flows remained manageable and that residents received adequate notification about schedule changes that might affect their daily activities. His reports documented the effectiveness of different traffic management approaches and identified modifications that improved safety and convenience for both construction operations and community activities. The highway construction project demonstrated the police department's capabilities for managing complex coordination challenges that required balancing competing interests while maintaining public safety and community functionality. Chief Holloway noted that the experience provided valuable training for officers in traffic management techniques and interagency coordination that would benefit future projects and emergency situations. The autumn of 2015 brought reports of unusual nighttime activity in the residential neighborhoods near the elementary school. Residents reported seeing individuals walking through yards and alleyways during late evening hours, apparently observing houses and property arrangements rather than traveling to specific destinations. Officer Walsh investigated these reports systematically, conducting additional patrol coverage during evening hours and coordinating with residents who had made observations about suspicious activities. Her investigation revealed that the nighttime activity was being conducted by members of a volunteer neighborhood security group that had organized informally to provide additional crime prevention presence in response to recent news reports about residential burglaries in surrounding communities. The volunteer security activities were well-intentioned but had not been coordinated with police department operations, creating potential for conflicts with official patrol activities and misunderstandings about the scope of authority for citizen crime prevention efforts. Walsh worked with the volunteer group to develop coordination procedures that supported their community security goals while ensuring appropriate boundaries between citizen activities and official law enforcement responsibilities. The patches and resolution of this situation led to establishment of a formal neighborhood watch program that provided training and coordination structure for citizen crime prevention activities while maintaining clear distinctions between volunteer roles and police responsibilities. The program became a model for other communities in the region and demonstrated effective collaboration between citizen, volunteers, and professional law enforcement. Chief Holloway's logbook entries from this period document the increasing sophistication of community organization and citizen involvement in addressing local challenges. She noted that residents were taking more active roles in identifying problems and developing solutions, but that these activities required police coordination to ensure effectiveness and prevent conflicts with official procedures and legal requirements. The winter of 2016 brought an unusual series of power outages that affected different parts of Millbrook on successive weekends, each lasting several hours but not affecting the entire community simultaneously. Investigation revealed that the outages were being caused by equipment failures and aging electrical distribution systems that required replacement but had not been identified through routine utility company maintenance procedures. The pattern of rolling outages created confusion and concern among residents who were uncertain about the causes and duration of electrical service interruptions. The police department served as a communication center for information about outage extent and expected restoration times, coordinating with utility company services while providing updates to residents and business owners who needed information for planning purposes. Officer Matthews worked with utility company technicians to identify the systematic problems that were causing the recurring outages, documenting equipment conditions and maintenance needs that required attention to prevent future service interruptions. His technical background and communication skills enabled effective coordination between utility operations and community information needs. The electrical system improvements that resulted from this investigation provided more reliable power service for the community while demonstrating how police coordination could facilitate infrastructure improvements that benefited long-term community development. Chief Holloway noted that the incident revealed the police department's potential role in coordinating community responses to infrastructure challenges that affected multiple aspects of municipal operations. The spring of 2017 brought reports of unauthorized camping activity in the wooded areas along Millers Creek, with residents observing tent sites and campfire remains that suggested someone was living temporarily in locations that were not designated for recreational camping. The activity raised concerns about property rights, environmental impacts, and public safety that required careful investigation to determine appropriate responses. Officer Chun investigated the camping reports and discovered that the temporary residents were a family that had experienced economic difficulties and temporary housing displacement, but were maintaining employment in the area while seeking permanent housing solutions. The family had chosen camping locations that minimized environmental impact and property intrusion while allowing them to maintain their work schedules and children's school attendance. Chun worked with city social services and county assistance programs to identify housing resources and temporary support services that could help the family transition to stable housing while maintaining their employment and community connections. The situation required coordination between multiple agencies and careful attention to privacy and dignity concerns while addressing the immediate practical challenges. The resolution of this situation led to development of emergency housing assistance procedures that could provide temporary support for families experiencing housing displacement while maintaining appropriate boundaries between law enforcement, social services, and community assistance activities. The procedures became part of the police department's community service protocols and provided frameworks for addressing similar situations that might arise in the future. Chief Holloway's logbook entries document how these various situations demonstrated the evolution of police work in Millbrook from traditional law enforcement activities to broader community coordination and problem-solving responsibilities. She noted that officers increasingly served as liaison contacts between different community groups, government agencies, and service organizations rather than simply responding to criminal activities or enforcing legal requirements. The summer of 2017 brought different challenges when increased recreational activity along Millers Creek created conflicts between different user groups who had competing interests in how the waterway and surrounding areas should be managed. Fishing enthusiasts wanted quiet areas with minimal disturbance, while families with children preferred accessible locations with picnic facilities and swimming opportunities. The conflicts generated complaints about noise levels, parking problems, and environmental impacts that required police mediation to prevent escalation into more serious disputes. Officer Rodriguez worked with different recreational user groups to develop informal agreements about peak usage times, activity locations, and shared responsibility for maintaining environmental quality and community access. The creek management agreements demonstrated community capacity for collaborative problem solving when provided with appropriate facilitation and coordination support. Chief Holloway noted that the police department's role in these situations emphasized communication and mediation skills rather than enforcement authority. requiring officers to develop expertise in conflict resolution and group process facilitation. The autumn of 2017 brought reports of unusual activity at the abandoned Wagner property that had been the site of Thomas Garrett's unauthorized gardening activities several years earlier. New reports suggested that different individuals were now using the property for activities that appeared less benign than Garrett's horticultural projects. Investigation revealed that the property was being used as a meeting location for a group of teenagers who were engaging in underage drinking and substance experimentation away from parental supervision and community observation. The activities were not creating property damage or affecting neighboring properties, but they raised concerns about safety and legal liability that required appropriate intervention. Officer Walsh worked with parents and school administrators to address the teenage drinking activities through education and supervision rather than criminal enforcement, recognizing that punitive approaches might be less effective than collaborative efforts to provide appropriate recreational alternatives and adult guidance. The intervention required careful attention to balancing community safety concerns with understanding of adolescent development, needs, and family relationships. The resolution of this situation led to development of expanded recreational programming for teenagers that provided supervised activities and community engagement opportunities as alternatives to unsupervised gathering in inappropriate locations. The programs addressed underlying social needs while preventing future problems and demonstrated effective coordination between law enforcement, educational institutions, and community organizations. As this fourth volume draws to its close, Chief Holloway's decade of detailed observations and careful documentation has revealed the complex evolution of a small community adapting to changing economic conditions, demographic shifts, and social challenges while maintaining the cooperative relationships and problem-solving capabilities that define effective community life. The police department's role has evolved from traditional law enforcement to broader coordination and facilitation, responsibilities that support community, capacity for addressing challenges through collaborative approaches that serve both individual needs and collective welfare. The logbook entries that document these changes provide insights into how effective police leadership can facilitate community development while maintaining appropriate professional boundaries and legal responsibilities, creating models for rural law enforcement that emphasize service and coordination rather than simply enforcement and control. The rural roads that extend beyond Millbrook's residential neighborhoods form a network of gravel and paved surfaces that connect the town to farms, abandoned properties, and natural areas where the boundaries between community life and agricultural landscape become increasingly indistinct. Officer James Rodriguez has developed particular familiarity with these outlying areas during his afternoon and evening patrol duties, learning to read the subtle signs that indicate normal agricultural activity versus situations that might require police attention or investigation. The Henley Farm, located 3 miles north of town along County Road 47, encompasses 400 acres of corn and soybean production that has been operated by the same family for 4 generations. The farm generates occasional police reports related to equipment theft, trespassing by hunters or recreational vehicle users, and disputes with neighboring property owners about boundary lines or drainage issues that affect adjacent fields during periods of heavy rainfall. Rodriguez has developed a cooperative relationship with Dale Henley, the current farm operator, who serves as an informal source of information about activities in the rural areas that might not be immediately apparent to officers conducting routine patrol checks. Henley's daily work takes him throughout the agricultural areas surrounding Millbrook, providing opportunities to observe vehicle activity, property conditions, and unusual circumstances that could indicate developing problems or safety concerns. During the autumn of 2018, Henley reported observing vehicles parked along rural roads during nighttime hours in locations where such activity was unusual and potentially concerning. The vehicles appeared at different locations on successive nights, always positioned to provide views of farm properties or access to field, roads that led to areas not visible from main transportation routes. Asterisk. Rodriguez investigated these reports by conducting extended patrol coverage of rural areas during evening and early morning hours, using elevated observation points and strategic positioning to monitor activity without alerting potential trespassers to police presence. His surveillance revealed that the vehicle activity was being conducted by individuals who appeared to be conducting systematic observation of agricultural properties, particularly those with valuable equipment or livestock that might represent attractive targets for theft. The surveillance pattern suggested coordination between multiple individuals who were sharing information about property layouts, security measures, and activity schedules that could facilitate future criminal activity. Rodriguez documented license, plate numbers, vehicle descriptions, and timing patterns that indicated the observers were likely from outside the immediate area and possessed detailed knowledge of agricultural operations that enabled them to identify vulnerable targets. Coordination with law enforcement agencies in surrounding counties revealed that similar surveillance activity had been reported in other agricultural areas, suggesting an organized effort to identify targets for equipment theft or livestock rustling that might affect multiple communities. The regional coordination led to enhanced patrol coverage and communication networks that eventually resulted in arrests of individuals who had been planning systematic theft operations targeting rural properties. The resolution of this investigation demonstrated the value of cooperative relationships between police officers and agricultural operators who could provide early warning about suspicious activities in areas that were too extensive for regular patrol coverage. Rodriguez's reports emphasized how rural law enforcement required different approaches than urban policing, with greater dependence on community cooperation and extended surveillance capabilities. Old railroad depot that serves freight traffic, but no longer provides passenger service, sits approximately 1 mile east of Millbrook's business district, surrounded by industrial facilities and storage areas that generate occasional police attention. The depot area includes loading facilities, equipment storage yards, and maintenance buildings that operate primarily during daytime hours, but occasionally require security attention during evening and weekend periods when regular staff are not present. Officer Patricia Walsh includes the depot area in her night shift patrol routine, conducting regular checks to ensure that security measures remain effective and that unauthorized access does not occur during hours when the facilities are unmonitored by railroad personnel. Her reports document normal nighttime conditions at the depot, while noting any unusual activities or circumstances that might require follow-up investigation. During the winter of 2019, Walsh observed unusual lighting patterns at the depot during her routine security checks, with illumination appearing in buildings that were normally dark during nighttime hours. Investigation revealed that maintenance crews were working extended hours to complete winter equipment servicing that had been delayed by weather conditions and parts availability issues. The extended maintenance schedule created unfamiliar activity patterns that generated concern from nearby residents who were not aware of the legitimate reasons for increased nighttime activity at the depot. Walsh coordinated with railroad supervisors to ensure that community members received appropriate notification about temporary schedule changes that might affect noise levels or traffic patterns in the depot area. Coordination prevented misunderstandings, while ensuring that security monitoring continued to protect railroad property and equipment from potential theft or vandalism. Walsh's reports documented the effectiveness of communication between railroad operations and community policing activities, creating precedents for managing future situations where operational changes might affect community concerns. The banks of Miller's Creek provide recreational opportunities and natural habitat that attract both local residents and visitors from surrounding communities who use the waterway for fishing, canoeing, and nature observation activities. The creek flows through private property and public access areas that require different approaches to law, enforcement, and security monitoring, with property rights and environmental protection concerns affecting how police respond to various situations. Officer Sarah Sheen has developed expertise in creek-related issues through her involvement with environmental research coordination and recreational user conflicts that have required police mediation over several years. Her understanding of seasonal patterns, wildlife behavior, and recreational activity cycles enables her to distinguish between normal creek usage and situations that might require intervention or investigation. During the spring of 2019, Chun received reports about unusual nighttime activity along creek banks in areas where such activity was unexpected, given normal recreational patterns and property access restrictions. Residents reported seeing lights and hearing sounds that suggested organized activities rather than casual recreational use, but the remote locations and nighttime timing made detailed observation difficult. Chun's investigation revealed that the nighttime creek activity was being conducted by individuals engaged in unauthorized fishing using methods that violated state fishing regulations and potentially damaged aquatic habitat. The illegal fishing operations used lights and equipment that enabled intensive harvesting of fish populations but created environmental impacts that could affect long-term creek ecology and recreational fishing opportunities for legitimate users. The investigation required coordination with state conservation officers who had jurisdiction over wildlife violations while working with local property owners to address trespassing issues that accompanied the illegal fishing activities. Chun's reports documented the complex jurisdictional challenges involved in addressing environmental crimes that occurred on private property but affected public natural resources. The resolution of the illegal fishing investigation led to enhanced monitoring of creek areas during periods when violations were most likely to occur, with coordination between local police, state conservation officers, and property owners creating comprehensive coverage that deterred future violations while protecting both property rights and environmental quality. The abandoned Kozłowski Farm, located 5 miles west of Millbrook along a gravel road that receives minimal traffic, has been vacant for 8 years since the family relocated to assisted living facilities in another state. The property includes a deteriorating farmhouse, several outbuildings in various states of repair, and agricultural fields that have returned to natural vegetation without regular cultivation or maintenance. The abandoned farm generates occasional police reports related to trespassing, vandalism, and concerns about property security that affect neighboring farms whose owners worry about potential criminal activity or safety hazards associated with unmonitored buildings and equipment. The property's isolation and deteriorating condition create attractive nuisance situations that require periodic police attention. Officer Walsh conducts regular security checks of the abandoned farm during her night shift patrols, documenting property conditions and noting any signs of unauthorized access or activity that might require follow-up investigation. Her reports create a chronological record of the property's gradual deterioration while monitoring for activities that might affect community safety or neighboring property values. During the autumn of 2019, Walsh observed signs of recent activity at the abandoned farm that suggested someone had been using the buildings for temporary shelter or storage purposes. Vehicle tracks in the overgrown driveway appeared fresh. Windows that had been broken showed evidence of recent boarding repairs, and the area around the farmhouse had been cleared of vegetation that would normally accumulate without maintenance. Walsh's investigation revealed that the property was being used by individuals who had been displaced from other housing situations and were seeking temporary shelter while working to establish more permanent living arrangements. The temporary residents had made efforts to maintain the property and avoid damage while respecting neighboring farms and maintaining low visibility to prevent conflicts with local residents. Asterisk, The situation required coordination with social services and property management representatives to address immediate housing needs while resolving legal issues related to unauthorized occupancy of private property. Walsh worked with county assistance programs to identify legitimate housing resources while ensuring that the abandoned property remained secure and did not become a long-term squatting location. The resolution of this situation demonstrated the complex social challenges that could affect rural communities when economic pressures created housing displacement that exceeded available support services. Walsh's reports documented the need for better coordination between emergency housing assistance and rural law enforcement to address humanitarian concerns while maintaining property security and community safety. The intersection of County Roads 47 and 23, located approximately 4 miles southwest of Millbrook, serves as a crossing point for agricultural traffic traveling between different farming areas and provides access to several properties that are not visible from main transportation routes. The intersection requires police attention during certain seasons when heavy agricultural equipment creates traffic conflicts and during periods when visibility is reduced by weather conditions or seasonal vegetation growth. Rodriguez includes this intersection in his rural patrol route, paying particular attention during harvest seasons when increased truck traffic and oversized equipment movements create potential safety hazards for other motorists who may not be familiar with agricultural transportation patterns. His reports document traffic conditions and safety concerns that affect both agricultural operations and general public transportation safety. During the summer of 2020, Rodriguez received reports about unusual activity at the intersection during nighttime hours, with residents observing vehicles that appeared to be conducting organized meetings or exchanges, rather than simply passing through the area. The report suggested that multiple vehicles were gathering at scheduled times for purposes that were not apparent to casual observation. Rodriguez's investigation involved extended surveillance of the intersection during evening and early morning hours, using concealed observation positions that allowed monitoring without alerting potential participants to police presence. His surveillance revealed that the nighttime gatherings were being conducted by members of different farming families who were coordinating agricultural activities and sharing equipment resources in ways that required confidential planning to protect competitive advantages. The nighttime meetings represented legitimate business coordination between agricultural operators who were working together to reduce costs and improve efficiency through shared equipment usage and coordinated timing of farming operations. The confidential nature of these arrangements reflected competitive concerns within the agricultural community rather than illegal activities that required police intervention. Rodriguez's investigation demonstrated the importance of understanding agricultural business practices when evaluating potentially suspicious activities in rural areas. His reports documented how normal business activities could appear unusual to observers who were not familiar with the competitive dynamics and cooperative relationships that characterized modern farming operations. The old stone bridge that carries County Road 23 across Miller's Creek represents one of the oldest pieces of transportation infrastructure in the Millbrook area, having been constructed in the 1890s to serve the agricultural community that was developing around the railroad depot. The bridge requires periodic inspection and maintenance to ensure continued safety for vehicle traffic while preserving its historical character and environmental compatibility with the creek ecosystem. The bridge area generates police reports related to recreational activities that sometimes conflict with its primary transportation function, with fishing enthusiasts and nature observers using the structure and surrounding areas in ways that can create safety hazards for motorists or environmental impacts that affect creek quality. The bridge also serves as a gathering location for teenagers and young adults who appreciate its scenic qualities and relative isolation from adult supervision. Officer Chun coordinates with County Road maintenance services and environmental agencies to ensure that recreational use of the bridge area remains compatible with transportation safety and environmental protection requirements. Her reports document seasonal patterns of recreational activity while noting any circumstances that might require intervention to prevent safety hazards or environmental damage. During the spring of 2020, Chun received reports about unusual nighttime activity near the bridge that appeared more organized and systematic than typical recreational use. Residents reported seeing lights and vehicles at the bridge during late evening hours when recreational activity would normally be minimal, suggesting activities that might require investigation to determine their nature and legality. Chun's investigation revealed that the bridge area was being used for organized photography and art projects by individuals who were documenting historical structures and natural landscapes for academic and cultural preservation purposes. The nighttime timing was chosen to take advantage of lighting conditions and to avoid conflicts with daytime traffic and recreational activities. The photography projects were being conducted by students and faculty from the regional university who were creating archives of rural infrastructure and landscape, features that documented cultural and environmental history for research and educational purposes. The projects had received appropriate permissions from property owners and government agencies, but had not been coordinated with local law enforcement to prevent misunderstandings about the nature of the activities. Chun worked with the university participants to establish communication procedures that would prevent future concerns while supporting legitimate research and documentation, activities that benefited historical preservation and educational objectives. Her coordination created precedents for managing academic research activities in rural areas where unfamiliar activities might generate community concerns. The Murphy Homestead, located 6 miles north of Millbrook along a dead-end gravel road, represents one of the original farming operations that established agricultural activity in the area during the late 19th century. The property has been maintained by successive generations of the Murphy family and continues to operate as a diversified farm that produces crops and livestock while maintaining many traditional farming practices that reflect the property's historical character. The Murphy farm generates occasional police reports related to its role as a local landmark and gathering place for community events that sometimes require traffic control or security assistance. The family maintains cooperative relationships with neighbors and community organizations while preserving agricultural operations that contribute to the area's economic and cultural heritage. Patrick Murphy, the current farm operator and cousin of the tavern owner in town, serves as an informal communication link between rural agricultural areas and the community policing activities of the Millbrook Police Department. His extensive knowledge of property boundaries, historical land use patterns, and neighboring farm operations provides valuable context for understanding rural incidents and activities that might require police attention. During the winter of 2020, Murphy reported observing unusual vehicle activity on roads adjacent to his property during early morning hours, when such traffic was unexpected and potentially concerning. The vehicles appeared to be conducting systematic observation of different farm properties, following patterns that suggested organized surveillance rather than random travel through rural areas. Murphy's reports prompted Rodriguez to expand surveillance coverage of rural roads during early morning hours, coordinating with other agricultural operators to gather additional information about suspicious vehicle activity. The expanded surveillance revealed patterns of organized observation that suggested potential planning for criminal activities, targeting agricultural equipment or livestock. The investigation led to coordination with law enforcement agencies in multiple counties, revealing a network of individuals who were planning systematic theft operations targeting high-value agricultural equipment and livestock from farms that appeared to have inadequate security measures. The investigation resulted in arrests that prevented significant economic losses for agricultural operators throughout the region. The successful resolution of this investigation demonstrated the value of cooperative relationships between rural police operations and agricultural community members who could provide early warning about suspicious activities in areas that were too extensive for regular patrol coverage. Murphy's assistance and similar cooperation from other farmers created an informal surveillance network that enhanced security for the entire agricultural community. The old Millers Creek Railroad trestle, abandoned since the 1960s when rail line routes were consolidated, crosses the creek approximately 2 miles upstream from the Stone Bridge and provides access to hiking trails and fishing locations that are popular with outdoor recreation enthusiasts. The trestle structure requires periodic safety inspections to ensure that deteriorating conditions do not create hazards for pedestrians who use it as part of recreational trail systems. The trestle area generates police reports related to safety concerns, environmental protection issues, and occasional vandalism that affects the structure's historical integrity and recreational accessibility. The remote location and limited vehicle access create challenges for police monitoring while making the area attractive for activities that might benefit from isolation from community observation. Officer Walsh includes the trestle area in her extended patrol coverage during night shifts, conducting periodic checks to ensure that recreational use remains safe and that unauthorized activities do not create problems for property owners or environmental quality. Her reports document seasonal patterns of recreational use while noting any unusual circumstances that might require follow-up investigation. During the autumn of 2020, Walsh observed signs of organized activity at the trestle that appeared more systematic than typical recreational use. Evidence of recent camping, fire sites, and equipment storage suggested that someone was using the area for extended occupancy, rather than temporary recreational visits. Walsh's investigation revealed that the trestle area was being used by individuals who were conducting unauthorized archaeological exploration of sites along the creek that were believed to contain artifacts from early settlement periods. The unauthorized excavations were creating environmental impacts and potentially destroying legitimate archaeological sites that had scientific and historical value. The investigation required coordination with state archaeological authorities and property owners to address unauthorized excavation activities while protecting legitimate archaeological sites from further damage. Walsh worked with academic researchers to ensure that legitimate archaeological investigation could continue under appropriate supervision while preventing unauthorized activities that might damage important historical resources. The resolution of this situation led to establishment of formal procedures for coordinating archaeological research with law enforcement and property owners, creating frameworks for protecting historical resources while supporting legitimate academic research that contributed to understanding of regional history and cultural development. The network of farm roads, creek access points, railroad infrastructure, and abandoned properties that surrounds Millbrook creates a complex landscape where normal agricultural and recreational activities intersect with occasional criminal concerns and unusual circumstances that require police attention. The rural nature of these areas requires different approaches to law enforcement than urban or suburban policing, with greater dependence on community cooperation, extended surveillance capabilities, and understanding of agricultural and environmental factors that influence activity patterns. Officer Rodriguez's specialized knowledge of rural policing has enabled the Millbrook Police Department to develop effective strategies for COBA, addressing challenges in outlying areas while maintaining cooperative relationships with agricultural operators, property owners, and recreational users who share interests in maintaining community safety and environmental quality. His reports document successful coordination between urban police, techniques and rural community characteristics that create effective law enforcement coverage for areas that might otherwise be difficult to monitor adequately. The investigations conducted in these outlying areas have revealed connections between apparently isolated incidents that suggest broader patterns of organized criminal activity, environmental concerns, and social challenges that affect rural communities. The systematic documentation of these investigations provides insights into how rural law enforcement can address complex challenges to community cooperation and regional coordination while maintaining appropriate attention to both immediate safety concerns and longer-term community development needs. As this fifth volume draws to its close, the careful mapping of Millbrook's rural periphery has revealed how the quiet countryside contains its own mysteries and challenges that require patient observation and community cooperation to understand and address effectively. The farms, waterways, abandoned properties, and transportation infrastructure that surround the town create a complex landscape where normal activities and unusual circumstances intersect in ways that require careful attention and thoughtful analysis to distinguish between legitimate concerns and routine rural life. The Manila folder, labeled Traffic Incident 201-70847, contains documents that Ms. Janet Morrison has reviewed multiple times over the past 3 years, not because the case remained officially open, but because small discrepancies in witness statements continued to puzzle her systematic mind. The incident involved a minor collision at the intersection of Main Street and Oak Avenue during the evening rush hour on October 15, 2017, when most residents were returning home from work and the autumn light was beginning to fade behind the oak trees that lined the residential streets. The initial report, filed by Officer Sarah Chun, documented a routine fender bender between two vehicles whose drivers provided conflicting accounts of who had failed to yield the right-of-way at the four-way stop intersection. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, driving her burgundy sedan westbound on Oak Avenue, stated that she had come to a complete stop before proceeding through the intersection when the other vehicle, a blue pickup truck driven by Mr. Carl Henderson, failed to stop while traveling southbound on Main Street. That Mr. Henderson's account differed in subtle but significant details. He confirmed that Mrs. Patterson had stopped at the intersection, but insisted that she had then proceeded without adequately checking for cross traffic, failing to notice his approach despite his vehicle being clearly visible and traveling at appropriate speed for the residential area. Both drivers acknowledged that damage was minimal and that no injuries had occurred, but they disagreed about responsibility and requested official documentation for insurance purposes. Chun's investigation included interviews with 3 witnesses who had observed the collision from different vantage points around the intersection. Mrs. Dorothy Walsh, who had been walking her dog along the sidewalk on Main Street, corroborated Mrs. Patterson's account, stating that she had clearly seen the pickup truck proceed through the intersection without stopping. Mr. James Kowalski, who had been waiting in his vehicle at the opposite corner of the intersection, supported Mr. Henderson's version, claiming that Mrs. Patterson had failed to yield despite having adequate opportunity to observe approaching traffic. The third witness, 13-year-old Ashley Morrison, Janet Morrison's niece, had been riding her bicycle home from school and was positioned near the corner of the intersection when the collision occurred. Her statement, recorded carefully by Chun, despite the witness's age, provided details that seemed to support both of the conflicting driver accounts, while adding observations that neither driver had mentioned. In their initial statements, Ashley reported that both vehicles had appeared to stop at the intersection, with Mrs. Patterson's sedan arriving first and Mr. Henderson's pickup truck approaching from the perpendicular direction shortly afterward. She stated that Mrs. Patterson had waited at the stop sign for several seconds before beginning to proceed through the intersection, but that Mr. Henderson's vehicle had also begun moving at approximately the same time, creating the potential for confusion about which driver had the right of way. More significantly, Ashley mentioned seeing a third vehicle, a white van, that had been traveling behind Mr. Henderson's pickup truck but had stopped well back from the intersection when the collision occurred. The van driver had remained in the vehicle and left the scene shortly after the collision without offering to provide witness information or assistance to the involved parties. Chun's report noted Ashley's mention of the white van but did not pursue detailed investigation of the third vehicle, since it had not been directly involved in the collision and since the primary focus was on documenting the incident between the two vehicles that had actually made contact. The insurance companies for both drivers ultimately resolved the claim through their standard procedures, and the case was closed without determining definitive fault assignment. Morrison's subsequent reviews of the file were prompted by her recognition of similar patterns in other traffic incident reports from the same general area during the months surrounding the October collision. Her systematic cross-referencing of incident reports revealed that white vans had been mentioned in witness statements for 4 other minor traffic incidents during the autumn of 2017, always as vehicles that were present in the vicinity but not directly involved in the collisions being investigated. Pattern became more intriguing when Morrison discovered that the same intersections and road segments appeared repeatedly in these incident reports, despite the fact that these locations did not have particularly high traffic volumes or accident rates that would statistically explain the concentration of incidents. The intersections of Main Street with Oak Avenue, Elm Street, and Maple Street, along with the 4-way stop at the entrance to the elementary school, accounted for 6 of the 8 minor traffic incidents reported during a 3-month period. Morrison brought these observations to Chief Holloway's attention during one of their regular meetings about filing system updates and record-keeping procedures. Chief Holloway encouraged Morrison to prepare a detailed analysis of the traffic incident patterns, recognizing that systematic examination of seemingly routine incidents sometimes revealed important information about community safety concerns or developing problems that required police attention. The analysis revealed additional patterns that had not been apparent from individual incident reports. The times of the reported incidents clustered around specific hours: early morning between 7 and 8 when parents were driving children to school, and late afternoon between 4 and 5 when residents were returning from work. These timeframes corresponded with peak traffic periods when minor accidents were statistically more likely to occur, but the geographic concentration suggested factors beyond normal traffic volume variations. More significantly, Morrison's analysis revealed that several of the drivers involved in these minor incidents had provided similar descriptions of feeling confused or disoriented at the moment of collision. Despite favorable weather conditions and good visibility, Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Henderson, and 3 other drivers involved in separate incidents had all mentioned experiencing momentary uncertainty about traffic signal timing or right-of-way procedures that they normally navigated without difficulty. These reports of confusion prompted Chief Holloway to authorize a more detailed investigation of the intersection conditions and traffic control systems in the areas where incidents had been concentrated. Officer James Rodriguez was assigned to conduct systematic observation of traffic patterns and intersection operations during the time periods when incidents had typically occurred. Rodriguez's observations revealed subtle problems with traffic control signs that had not been apparent during routine patrol activities. The stop sign at the Main Street and Oak Avenue intersection had become partially obscured by tree growth that created shadows during certain lighting conditions, particularly during the autumn months when the angle of late afternoon sunlight created visibility problems for drivers approaching from specific directions. Similarly, the 4-way stop signs at the elementary school entrance had been positioned at heights that created sightline problems for drivers of certain vehicle types, particularly pickup trucks and SUVs whose elevated seating positions altered the viewing angles for observing cross-traffic and signal compliance by other vehicles. These positioning problems were subtle enough to escape notice during routine maintenance inspections, but significant enough to create momentary confusion for drivers navigating the intersections under specific conditions. Rodriguez's investigation also revealed that the white van mentioned in several witness statements belonged to a regional delivery service that had recently begun serving customers in Millbrook during the autumn of 2017. The delivery route followed a schedule that brought the van through the downtown area during peak traffic periods, and the driver's unfamiliarity with local traffic patterns sometimes created situations where other motorists felt pressured to navigate intersections more quickly than they would prefer. The delivery van driver, when contacted by Rodriguez, confirmed that he had observed several minor traffic incidents during his route activities, but had not realized that his presence might be contributing to intersection confusion. His vehicle's size and commercial markings created an impression of urgency that influenced other drivers' decision-making, even though the delivery schedule allowed adequate time for normal traffic flow without requiring aggressive driving behaviors. The resolution of these traffic pattern problems required coordination between the police department, city maintenance services, and the delivery company to modify intersection visibility, adjust delivery scheduling, and provide driver education about the impact of commercial vehicle presence on local traffic patterns. The modifications prevented future incidents while improving overall traffic safety in the downtown area. Morrison's systematic analysis had revealed how seemingly routine incidents could be connected by subtle environmental factors that affected driver behavior and intersection safety. Her attention to overlooked details in routine paperwork had identified patterns that required intervention to prevent continued problems, demonstrating the value of comprehensive record analysis for community policing effectiveness. The investigation file labeled Suspicious Activity 2018-1203 contains witness statements that Officer Patricia Walsh has reread numerous times, not because the statements were contradictory, but because they contained details that seemed unusually precise for casual observations, reported by citizens who claimed to have noticed activity only peripherally. While engaged in other activities, the case began with a phone call from Mrs. Hazel Morrison, who lived on Elm Street and reported seeing someone walking through her neighborhood during late evening hours carrying what appeared to be surveying equipment or similar technical devices. Mrs. Morrison stated that she had noticed the individual on 3 separate occasions over a 2-week period, always during twilight hours when visibility was limited but adequate for observing general activities. Walsh's initial interview with Mrs. Morrison revealed details that seemed remarkably specific for someone who claimed to have observed the activities only casually while closing curtains or checking door locks as part of her normal evening routine. Mrs. Morrison described the equipment as including tripod-mounted devices, measuring instruments, and notebook materials that suggested professional surveying or engineering activities rather than casual photography or recreational observation. Mrs. Morrison also provided detailed descriptions of the individual's clothing, estimated height and weight, and movement patterns that demonstrated systematic coverage of specific areas within the neighborhood. She noted that the person appeared to be recording measurements and observations in a notebook while focusing attention on utility poles, street light positions, and the locations of storm drains and other municipal infrastructure. Walsh documented Mrs. Morrison's observations carefully while noting the unusually detailed nature of her descriptions. Follow-up interviews with other residents in the area confirmed that similar activity had been observed by neighbors who had initially dismissed it as routine municipal maintenance or utility company work conducted during evening hours to avoid disrupting daytime traffic and business activities. However, contacts with city maintenance services and local utility companies revealed that no authorized surveying or Inspection work had been scheduled in the Elm Street area during the time period when the activities had been observed. The companies confirmed that evening work sometimes occurred during emergency situations or for projects requiring minimal traffic disruption, but no such projects had been authorized or conducted in the reported area. Walsh's investigation expanded to include systematic patrol coverage of the Elm Street neighborhood during evening hours, using concealed observation positions that would allow monitoring without alerting potential trespassers to police presence. Her surveillance confirmed that someone was indeed conducting regular activities in the area that involved technical equipment and systematic observation of municipal infrastructure. The surveillance revealed that the activities were being conducted by individuals who appeared to be working in pairs, with one person operating measuring equipment while another recorded observations and maintained watch for approaching vehicles or pedestrians. The coordination suggested professional training and experience with surveying or engineering activities, but the secretive timing and unauthorized nature of the work raised questions about the purpose and legality of the activities. Walsh's extended surveillance eventually led to contact with the individuals conducting the unauthorized surveying, who identified themselves as engineering consultants working for a telecommunications company that was planning infrastructure improvements in rural areas surrounding Millbrook. The company had apparently initiated preliminary surveying activities without obtaining proper permits or coordinating with municipal authorities about the scope and timing of their activities. Resolution of this investigation required coordination between the police department, city planning officials, and the telecommunications company to ensure that future infrastructure development projects followed appropriate authorization procedures and community notification protocols. The incident revealed gaps in municipal oversight of utility and communications infrastructure development that required policy modifications to prevent future unauthorized activities. Morrison's review of Walsh's investigation. Our EPORTS revealed additional details that had not been fully explored during the initial investigation. The witness statements contained references to vehicle license plates, equipment serial numbers, and timing details that suggested more systematic observation by community members than had been apparent from their initial claims about casual noticing of unusual activities. The precision of witness observations prompted Morrison to conduct more detailed analysis of other recent reports involving citizen observations of suspicious activities. Her review revealed patterns suggesting that several residents possessed more detailed knowledge about neighborhood activities than they typically revealed in initial police contacts, possibly due to informal neighborhood watch activities or personal security concerns that they preferred not to discuss explicitly. Asterisk. The analysis revealed that Mrs. Morrison and several other residents maintained informal logs of neighborhood activities that included detailed observations about vehicle traffic, pedestrian activity, and utility company work that affected their immediate areas. These informal security activities provided valuable community surveillance capabilities, but operated without coordination with official police operations or formal neighborhood watch programs. Morrison brought these observations to Chief Holloway's attention, suggesting that the informal surveillance activities might provide enhanced community security capabilities if they could be coordinated with official police operations while respecting resident privacy preferences and maintaining appropriate boundaries between citizen observation and law enforcement responsibilities. The discussion led to development of enhanced neighborhood communication procedures that allowed residents to share detailed observations with police while maintaining confidentiality about their informal security activities. The procedures recognized that community members might possess valuable information about suspicious activities, but might be reluctant to reveal the extent of their observations due to privacy concerns or fear of becoming involved in lengthy investigation processes. The evidence box labeled Property Recovery 2019-0456 contains items that were discovered during a routine patrol check of the abandoned Patterson farm and subsequently claimed by multiple individuals who provided conflicting information about ownership and circumstances of loss. The items included hand tools, gardening equipment, and decorative objects that appeared to have significant age and personal value despite their relatively modest monetary worth. Officer Rodriguez discovered the items in an outbuilding on the Patterson property during a security check prompted by neighbor reports about unusual activity in the area. The items were carefully organized and maintained in ways that suggested intentional storage rather than abandonment or casual dumping, but no obvious explanation existed for their presence on property that had been vacant for several years. Rodriguez's investigation included efforts to identify the owners of the recovered items through local advertising and coordination with residents who had filed theft reports during the previous year. The investigation revealed that several community members claimed ownership of items that matched descriptions of objects reported stolen from residential properties, but the claims included inconsistencies that raised questions about the accuracy of identification and the circumstances under which the items had originally been lost. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson claimed that a set of garden tools found in the Weddy outbuilding had been stolen from her shed approximately 18 months earlier, providing detailed descriptions that matched the recovered items and producing photographs that appeared to confirm her ownership claims. However, her theft report from the time period she mentioned could not be located in police files, and she could not provide specific dates or circumstances for the reported theft. Mr. Dale Henley claimed ownership of several items including a post-hole digger and fence repair tools that he stated had disappeared from his farm equipment storage area during the previous summer. His descriptions matched some of the recovered items, but he acknowledged that similar tools were commonly used throughout the agricultural community and that positive identification was difficult based on appearance alone. The most complex ownership claim came from Mrs. Dorothy Kellerman, who identified several decorative garden items as objects that had been displaced from her property during the previous year through the activities that were eventually traced to Thomas Garrett's informal community gardening network. Mrs. Kellerman stated that some items had been returned to her property after Garrett's activities were discovered and authorized, but that other objects had never been recovered and remained missing. Rodriguez's investigation revealed that the recovered items had been stored at the Patterson property for an extended period, with evidence suggesting that they had been collected gradually over several months or years, rather than deposited during a single incident. The storage methods indicated care for the items, preservation, and suggested that whoever had collected them intended to return them to their owners when appropriate opportunities arose. The investigation also revealed connections between the recovered items and the informal community networks that had been documented in previous police investigations involving unauthorized property improvements and informal assistance activities. Some of the tools and equipment appeared to have been used for community improvement projects before being stored at the Patterson property, suggesting coordination between different community service activities. Morrison's analysis of the evidence documentation revealed patterns in the recovery claims that suggested community members might be more willing to report items as stolen when opportunities for recovery arose than they had been to file initial theft reports when the items originally disappeared. The discrepancies between recovery claims and existing theft reports indicated that many minor property losses went unreported through official channels but remained important to affected residents. The analysis prompted review of police procedures for documenting minor property thefts and recoveries, with modifications designed to encourage reporting of minor incidents, while recognizing that many property disputes in small communities were resolved through informal mechanisms that did not require formal law enforcement intervention. The resolution of the property recovery situation involved coordination between police documentation, community mediation, and informal dispute resolution processes that allowed items to be returned to appropriate owners while addressing the underlying community network activities that had led to their displacement and storage. The resolution demonstrated how police operations could support community problem-solving activities while maintaining appropriate legal frameworks for property protection. The incident report file, labeled Disturbance Call 2020-0789, contains multiple versions of witness statements that were modified and expanded through follow-up interviews as residents gradually revealed additional information about activities they had initially described only briefly or incompletely. The case involved noise complaints from several residents who reported hearing unusual sounds during nighttime hours, but provided conflicting descriptions about the nature, timing, and location of the disturbances. The initial call came from Mr. Thomas Kimura, who reported hearing machinery noises during late evening hours that seemed inconsistent with normal agricultural or municipal maintenance activities in his neighborhood near the edge of town. His initial description was vague and tentative, suggesting that he was uncertain whether the sounds represented legitimate activities or problems that required police investigation. Officer Walsh responded to the call and conducted area checks that failed to identify obvious sources for the reported noises. Her initial report documented the residents' concerns while noting that no evidence of unauthorized activity or municipal code violations could be identified during her investigation. However, follow-up contacts with Mr. Kimura revealed that he had observed additional details that he had not mentioned during his initial call. He reported seeing vehicle lights in areas where such activity was unusual and noted that the machinery sounds had occurred on multiple occasions over a period of several weeks rather than being isolated incidents. Walsh's expanded investigation included interviews with other residents in the area who confirmed that they had also noticed unusual nighttime sounds and vehicle activity, but had not initially considered the observations significant enough to report to police. The residents revealed that they had discussed the activities among themselves and had developed informal theories about the possible sources and purposes of the disturbances. The expanded witness statements revealed that community members had been conducting their own informal investigation of the nighttime activities, coordinating observations, and sharing information through casual conversations and neighborhood communication networks. Their collaborative investigation had developed more detailed information about timing patterns, vehicle descriptions, and activity locations than had been apparent from individual reports. The informal community investigation had revealed that the nighttime activities were being conducted by municipal maintenance crews who were using evening hours to complete infrastructure, repair projects that required specialized equipment, and traffic control measures. The work was legitimate and authorized but had not been widely publicized due to concerns about generating complaints about noise and traffic disruptions during evening hours. Walsh's coordination with municipal maintenance services confirmed that several infrastructure projects had been conducted during evening hours to minimize disruption of daytime traffic and business activities. The projects included storm drain repairs, streetlight maintenance, and utility line inspections that required noisy equipment, but could be completed more efficiently during periods of reduced community activity. The resolution of this investigation revealed that community members often possessed detailed information about local activities, but might be reluctant to share complete observations during initial police contacts due to uncertainty about the significance of their information or concerns about becoming involved in lengthy investigation processes. Morrison's analysis of the evolving witness statements demonstrated how follow-up interviews and patient investigation could reveal additional information that significantly enhanced understanding of reported incidents. Her documentation procedures were modified to encourage more detailed initial reporting while recognizing that witness comfort and cooperation often improved through multiple contacts rather than single. Intensive interviews. As this sixth volume draws to its close, the careful attention to overlooked details and subtle patterns in routine. Paperwork has revealed how systematic analysis of accumulated information can provide insights that are not apparent from individual incident investigations. The patient review of witness statements, evidence documentation, and investigation reports has demonstrated connections between seemingly unrelated incidents that enhance understanding of community activities and social patterns that affect police operations and community safety.